Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
You seem captivated by the beautiful woman in the stunning little black dress, flirting with that sharp young man by the fireplace. She always looked incredible, but tonight, she was pure elegance and allure. She had chosen this moment to shine, wearing a black satin bustier cocktail dress that hugged her perfectly. Matching jeweled satin pumps elevated her nearly to 6 feet. Beneath it all, a Victoria's Secret lingerie set and stockings, her look completed with sparkling Tiffany diamond earrings. She'd invested 3 hours and thousands of dollars to look this flawless. That's my wife, Kathy. We've been married for over 25 years, and yes, she's beautiful. But I'd guess she's at least 15 or 20 years older than him. She sidestepped my question. I thought so. I saw you come in together. I'm surprised. You don't seem bothered by her being so flirtatious. And you don't seem like the type who'd be turned on by it, either. Am I right? No, but honestly, I'm not sure how I feel. I turned and looked at this. Well, I'm not sure how to describe her. She wasn't beautiful, more handsome if you can say that about a woman. But she is obviously well-to-do. Very bright and definitely exudes sex and class from every pore of her being. There were several women at the charity function who had looks similar to hers. My immediate thought was she was a doctor or lawyer. I told her, if I'm being honest here, it does excite me a little, I guess, but you're wrong about the anger part. Right now, anger is at the top of my list, but I'm also slightly jealous and frightened too, I think. As you can see, my emotions are all over the place. It's like all of them are taking little jabs at me simultaneously, and I can't process them effectively. It's very disconcerting to say the least. It's been going on now for about 20 minutes. I'm trying to decide whether or not I should go over there and break it up. I turned back to stare at my wife and the gentleman who now had his arm around my wife's hip and was gently caressing the small of her back. She seemed not to notice and was obviously enthralled with whatever he was whispering in her ear. If I didn't know better and was seeing them for the first time, I would easily think they had been lovers for years. Every move, each touch, seemed natural and well-patterned. On the other hand, I want her to have a good time. She's earned it. She has had a rough go of it for a while now. She lost both her parents and her only sibling in the last year. Work has been very difficult for her. She is the CFO for a tech company that has been trying to recover from some very bad business decisions. They have gone through several rounds of layoffs and the stress on her has been tremendous, but with her help they have started to turn the corner. In order to handle all of her stresses, she has been on a rigorous diet and exercise program for over a year now. You seem very proud of her. I sighed gently and turned back to this curious woman. I am. It hasn't been easy for her. Tonight is sort of a coming out of the darkness party for her. He was fondling the silver heart-shaped pendant hanging from my wife's neck. It was the only item including her matching lingerie that wasn't specifically purchased for this evening. It was a locket with our pictures inside of it that I gave her on our first anniversary all those many years ago. It wasn't much, but we didn't have much then. She told me she loved it, and 24 years later, even though she could afford much better, she still wore it every chance she got. I told her she didn't need to wear it tonight, but she said it was worth more to her than the rest of her outfit, and she wouldn't dream of not wearing it. They were both saying something obviously about it as they appeared to study it. As he turned it over, feigning great interest in its simple design, he let the back of his hand gently rest on her shoulder over her gown. She responded indifferently, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. It ratcheted up my anxiety level a great deal, though. While continuing to gaze at the two lovers, I asked the woman politely, "I'm sorry I didn't get your name?" When I got no immediate response, I pivoted to look at her and saw that she was so mesmerized by what was occurring between the man and my wife that she apparently hadn't heard me. I took a moment to glance around the great room. It seemed no one but this woman and I had taken any notice of the couple that was the center of our attention. I quietly inquired as to her name again as I leaned in close to her ear. As the party had progressed and alcohol continued to flow freely, the noise level had gone up considerably. She seemed startled and broke her eye contact from them and turned to me. "I'm sorry. I guess I was engrossed with the the couple. My name is Lena, Dr. Lena Brown." She grasped my hand and made a formal show of shaking it and went back to staring at them. "Ben Benson, do you know the gentleman obviously trying to seduce my wife?" I queried without breaking eye contact from them. "Are you certain it is he who is doing the seducing?" She said with a wry smile as we both watched my wife drape her arm over the front of his shoulder with her elbow and forearm resting on his chest as they clinked their crystal champagne glasses together in a toast of something. "No, I've never seen him before. He is quite a handsome man, though, don't you think?" We continued our conversation while never breaking eye contact on the couple, who were now leaning into each other in a very relaxed and familiar manner. Anyone who should take notice of them would definitely believe they had been a couple for some time. Yes, I suppose he is. I was becoming very anxious and was trying desperately to maintain a calm exterior. I'm not sure how successful I was. I was trying in a practiced manner to speak calmly and in a quiet voice, as was my habit in stressful situations. It was a trait that had served me well in my profession over the years. Most people under increasing stress tend to raise their voices, make threats, or babble incoherent, incomplete, repetitive sentences. I found it advantageous to do the opposite. It tends to embarrass and confuse those in an irrational state. Of course, that was in a business environment, and this was something entirely else. We stood silently side by side watching them for a few more minutes. There was no way we could turn away. It was too provocative. If it wasn't my wife involved, I would find it fairly erotic. I had a thought and sincerely questioned Dr. Lena. Are you married? What would you do in this situation if you were me? I doubtless said it too quickly for the circumstance and tried to soften my question, but she responded before I could repair it. I'm divorced over 5 years now. You didn't answer the second part of my question. Now it was her turn to exhale her breath, hers being much deeper than mine. She wistfully responded. If I'm being honest, I would say 2 things. First, I wish it was me with him instead of her. And secondly, I would tell you to do nothing. It would be pointless. Doing nothing hardly seems the right response here. Those emotions I told you about are starting to get the better of me. The 2 most prevalent are fear and anger. I fear I am losing my wife, and I am getting increasingly angry at him. I don't think he has missed the wedding ring on my wife's finger. He can probably feel it on his shoulder right now. Never mind see it. At that moment his hand slid lower on my wife's back, now gently resting at the top of her very shapely bottom as he began to guide her outside to the garden. Without comment, Lena and I discreetly followed them, both of us stopping to pick up fresh glasses of a fairly decent sparkling wine before heading outside too. As they passed by the brightly lit doorway into the dark outside, it was self-evident why she was enamored of him. His tuxedo, probably one of several Emporio Armanis he owned, hung perfectly on a well-toned frame. My tux was rented from J.C. Penney. He was definitely sporting a Rolex. Tag Heuer would be beneath him. I involuntarily pulled my sleeve over my $59 wristwatch I bought on Amazon. I'm betting it had the exact time on it that the man's Rolex did. He was probably 6 feet 2 inches or so without an ounce of fat anywhere. He had long, wavy, sandy-colored hair like a California surfer dude type, but his face and jaw line were tight and rugged. He looked like he just jumped out of a GQ cover photo. I felt a hand slip around my elbow and pull me in the opposite direction. Let's sit here and talk a bit, whispered Lena, and she pointed to a table out of the direct light. It was probably as discreet a location we would find with approximately 100 or so party guests milling about. I noted, though, that Mr. GQ had conducted my wife to a dark corner that offered much more privacy from the throng. When we situated ourselves at the ornamental iron cafe table, we could still maintain our view of the couple. He chose that exact moment to boldly clutch my wife to him and kiss her full on her lips, long and hard. She responded by placing both arms around his neck as she almost collapsed into him and returned it with a passion she had never given me. I started to jump up, but felt Lena pull me back down. Ben, please don't make a scene. It will only make matters worse. Think for a moment. I was starting to lose it and was getting ready to tell her to screw off and go in this affair when I saw a terrible sadness in her eyes that were glassy with tears. Lena, what aren't you telling me? It was more of a demand than a question. I was torn between choking Lena and trying to keep an eye on Kathy and the shithead so they couldn't sneak out. Lena must have read my mind. Ben, you don't have to watch them. They won't sneak out. They will come to you. Ethan will make Kathy tell you what they are going to do before he will leave with her. It is part of his thing. He gets off on the humiliation of the husband. He will look you directly in the eyes as Kathy tells you she is going to spend the weekend with him. How do you know all this? How can you? Wait, you were with him, weren't you? That's why you are divorced. Tell me who that a-hole is and what is going on, or so help me. My full attention was now on Lena. Talk to me, you witch. A frightened Dr. Brown spoke quickly. His name is Ethan Collins. He is extremely wealthy, although no one seems to know where his money comes from. Despite his frequent cucking of married men at these events, he is always invited because he donates large sums to the various charities involved. So, the foundation's members just overlook it. I glanced quickly around the patio. A few minutes ago, no one even noticed us, but now it seemed if everyone was watching. I guess the death of my marriage was tonight's entertainment. So that's what happened with you. I felt sick to my stomach, like a solid punch had just been delivered to my solar plexus. Just tell me, please. She was very emotional and hesitated frequently in telling her story. It was a very similar event, and I was here with my husband of 18 years. We have 3 kids. They barely speak with me today. I don't even know where my ex-husband is. I haven't talked with him in several years. Her tears were falling easily now. Lena, please. I'm sorry about your family, but just tell me what happened. Exactly what you were seeing going on with your wife. My husband Tom and I attended a fundraising event to upgrade our hospital's cardiology vascular lab with state-of-the-art EKG and other machines, as well as the latest implantable cardioverter defibrillators and other equipment. I hadn't been at the function more than 15 minutes when Collins set his sights on me. It seemed like a few minutes later, I was standing in front of my husband and some other invited dignitaries telling him I was leaving with Ethan. It really was a couple of hours, I'm sure. She broke down again. I looked right at the love of my life, the father of my 3 young teenage children, and told him I was going to spend the weekend with Ethan. I knew my marriage was over when I saw the shocked look quickly turn to anger on his face, but I was going anyway. Tom started to get up into Ethan's face, but a couple of the organizers' security team had appeared out of nowhere and physically convinced him to sit back down. I turned and walked away from his pleading voice, telling me to stop, but I didn't. Ethan was smiling the whole time with his arm around my waist as we left. Jesus. It gets worse, Ben. You need to brace yourself for this part. It was by far the best sexual experience of my life. It was unworldly. And despite everything I lost, if Ethan asked me to go with him again, I would. The hell with this shit. I'm going over there right now and put a stop to it. Don't do it, Ben. All you will do is embarrass yourself. Look around you. Everyone knows what is coming, and they are all watching you. The Foundation's security is already heading over to us. Besides, Ethan and your wife are coming our direction right now anyway. She is going to go with him no matter what you do or say. I looked behind me, and sure enough, that shithead Ethan had his arm around my wife's waist, her hips really guiding her to me. He had a smirk on his face that no one could miss, and he never changed his expression or broke eye contact with me. My wife at least had the decency to look away when she saw my disposition. In that instant, I knew 2 things. First, my marriage was over. No matter what happened in the next 5 minutes, we were done. Secondly, I wasn't going to play the helpless victim and be the evening's floor show. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I turned back to Lena before they arrived to be greeted with the look of a woman who clearly was in lust with Collins. Shit, if he asked her, she would probably have sex with him on the table right now. Damn it. All of a sudden, a large cocktail party that was very boisterous 30 seconds ago got deathly quiet as I started to try to engage Lena in a conversation. From behind me came, Ben. Honey, I want you to meet someone. Her voice was cracking as she said it. I guess shitting all over a 25-year marriage is stressful. I didn't even turn around. I ignored her completely. I asked a shocked Dr. Brown to tell me about her children. Her mouth dropped open. She tried to recover and speak, but only emitted a couple of squeaks. Much louder this time. Ben, I want you to meet someone. This time with surprise and embarrassment in her voice. Still looking at Dr. Brown and waiting for her response, I continued to disregard them both. Then the shithead Collins interrupted. Excuse me, Mr. Benson. You really need to listen to what your wife has to say. His voice laden with mockery. I didn't react to him, and I repeated my question to Lena. I really want to hear about your children. Not only was the room silent, but everyone seemed frozen in their places. Lena was regaining her wits, but before she could speak, we were disrupted again. Ben, please turn around and look at me, my wife implored. I couldn't decide if she was exasperated or aggravated. I turned slowly and glanced at them both for a moment. They were becoming aware of the scene they were causing, and their discomfort was rising. Honey, this is... I interrupted pointedly and spoke forcefully while my eyes bore into hers. Kathy, you have never looked more beautiful than tonight. You are truly a vision. Her face lit up. She began to smile and speak, but I broke in. Goodbye, Kathy. And I turned back to my table mate. You were saying, Lena? People were beginning to titter and laugh nervously at the unfolding standoff. I could sense the 2 lovebirds' embarrassment growing. Lena started to speak of her 3 children in a light manner, which caused even more reaction from the gathered crowd. Then Collins made an almost fatal mistake. He put his hand on my shoulder and tried to pull me in his direction. Lena knew instantly what was going to happen, so trying to avoid disaster, she asked in a loud voice, Ethan, why don't you go home with me instead of her? You won't be sorry. Ethan removed his hand from my shoulder and asked politely, Do we know each other, madam? At that moment, I saw an expression of utter dejection on Lena's face. She had sacrificed her family and dignity to someone who didn't even remember her. I can't recall seeing someone in so much pain. What she had done was finally hitting home, and life was seeping out of her rapidly like air from a punctured balloon. There was something else that flitted across her face. I became genuinely concerned for her welfare. It was time to end this circus. I turned back to Kathy and Collins. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were still here. You may go now," and I waved them away with my hand. I always wanted to use Val Kilmer's line from Tombstone. It only took the end of my marriage to do it. I vaguely heard my wife say, "We'll talk when I get home Sunday night." They turned and left without further comment, but it was obvious that Mr. Collins was not a happy man. His perfectly structured cheekbones were beet red with embarrassment. It wasn't much, but it was a small victory. Looking around the patio, I could see that the attendees were disappointed that there wasn't more of a show. Sorry to disappoint. Maybe next time, folks. I thought to myself. The two beefy security guys gave short laughs as they turned and walked away. Lena, having somewhat recovered, offered, "She thinks you will get past this." No, she couldn't possibly. She has to know she just ended our marriage, and she is going with him anyway. You were right about everything. I felt melancholy. Thank you for trying. But I have to know, did you do that for me, or you? Neither. I tried to do it for your wife. I have lived for the past 5 years with the emotional turmoil and pain she is going to experience. Something was already dead inside of Dr. Brown, and it shook me to my core. Dr. Brown, Lena, I know what you are thinking right now. Please don't do it. It isn't worth it. What are you talking about, Ben? Don't play games with me. Look me in my eyes and tell me you aren't thinking about harming yourself. Funny, my thoughts weren't with my wife or marriage, but I was deeply troubled that Dr. Brown was possibly going to end her misery and do so tonight. She couldn't look at me. She just dropped her head and wept. "All right, Doc, you have 3 choices. You and I can sit here all night long and talk. We can go to a 24-hour coffee shop and speak there, or I can take you home. What's it going to be?" She gave a little snort. "You aren't that great a conversationalist. You may as well just take me home." Still quick with a sharp wit even in the face of all this. I was starting to like Dr. Brown. We drove the 35 minutes to her apartment in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I did keep looking over at her, and even in the darkness could tell she was having bad thoughts. Most people who commit suicide don't want to die any more than anyone else. They just have acceptance that there is nothing else to live for, and their desire to stop their pain is stronger than their fear of death. And Dr. Brown, like most medical professionals, had little fear of death anyway. They saw it every day. Doctors and nurses understand that no matter how much physical or mental pain someone is in at the moment of the cessation of their life, you can observe the agonizing scars of age, disease, and pain disappear, and the deceased would have an indescribable look of peace. All the age lines and crevices of ache and suffering disappear. Their eyes, long dulled by aging, are alive and bright, and for a moment they look young again. Many who have been too long in the field and have seen too much are envious of the dying. Of course, it only lasts a moment before the physiological process of death takes over, but it is the last moment that one remembers. For medical personnel and others such as military and first responders, it must sometimes seem tempting. I had lost my wife, but I wasn't going to lose Dr. Lena Brown. The irony wasn't lost on me. When we arrived at her apartment, I escorted her to the door, took her keys from her, unlocked it, and followed her inside. "Thank you, Ben. I can get myself to bed." "What are you doing?" I was taking off my jacket and tie, followed by kicking off my shoes. "I'm not leaving you alone tonight. I will sleep here on the couch, but I am not going to leave you until I know you are going to be okay. You are too important. Don't even think about arguing." And I plopped myself down on the couch and watched her. She just stared back at me for a few moments, then without a word turned and walked into her bedroom. I looked around the apartment. It was pretty stark for a woman's home. There was not a single family photo or memory to be seen anywhere. Not a good sign. 5 minutes later, she came back out wrapped in a fluffy blue and white robe. She went to the kitchenette and poured us a couple of glasses from a previously opened bottle of red wine. She came into the living room and sat down on the couch next to me. She once again had tears in her eyes, but they were of a different kind. They were tears of gratitude. "Okay, Ben, let's talk. Sometimes it doesn't take much more than caring to save someone's life." 5 years later. Today was the 5th anniversary of my divorce being finalized, and coincidentally, it was my first grandchild Jonathan's 2nd birthday. Today would be the initial time Kathy and I had been in the same place at the same time since I filed for divorce. That isn't completely true. We tried to be in the same room once a few months after the final decree, but it didn't go well at all. It was partially my fault. Well, admittedly, it was mostly my fault. I could have taken the high road and been an adult about it, But I was still pretty angry, so when my wife approached me to talk about it at our daughter's graduation reception, I took the low road instead. "Hello, Ben. I've missed you." When I interrupted with, "Hello, Miss Brett, how are?" she ran crying out of the room. If looks could kill, I would have been dead right then and there. Most of the family members in attendance were shooting daggers at me. I did have to give credit to our kids, though. We raised them right, and they were smart enough not to get into the middle of our separation. But as they pointed out after the reception fiasco, I acted childishly. They did, however, have the good sense to decide that there would be no further attempts at having the two of us at the same family function. Well, what did they expect? Our divorce was pretty acrimonious. I can't take all the credit for that because even though I was angry and wanted my pound of flesh, my wife fought the divorce in every way she could, which I wasn't exactly sure how you did that in a no-fault environment. I think her strategy was to utilize every delaying tactic possible to make the divorce so expensive I would give it up. Having money, though, is one of the few downsides in a divorce. It can go on for quite a while and lawyers get paid regardless. In any case, I wasn't giving it up. But Dr. Brown had been right again. Kathy thought I would get past her little weekend fling. I wondered if she tried the same tactics during her divorce. I never asked her, though. Kathy also somehow got the family law judge to order mandatory counseling. I suppose it wasn't really mandatory, but when the judge looks at you and says, "Mr. Benson, while I can't order counseling because there are no minor children involved, are you really saying that you can't do a few weeks of counseling to try and save a 25-year relationship? What are you supposed to do?" We agreed. I mean to say the lawyers agreed on 12 sessions, but after the third one, both my wife and the assigned counselor knew it was hopeless, and we all agreed to call it off. As I remember it, my wife ran out the room crying then too. I think the consensus was reached after I said something like, "Do you really believe I am going to stay married to a bitch that wanted to introduce me to her boyfriend so she could tell me she was going to have sex with him all weekend long in the middle of a damn charity function with a couple hundred people watching?" It was an honest question, but perhaps I could have been more tactful. It did get my point across, though. I did get the last laugh, too. After her counseling gambit, I had my very eager young, heavily saddled with tuition debt lawyer amend the divorce petition to include spousal support for me. You see, my wife's total income package was more than twice mine. And after 25 years, I had the right to a portion of it. Something about, in a manner accustomed to. I didn't really need it as we were both able to provide for ourselves comfortably enough, but it was the principle of it, right? Although not nearly what I demanded, I did get a nominal amount, mostly because her legal team told her what might happen with her investments, retirement, profit sharing, etc. if we didn't have an agreement in place beforehand. She conceded to the support, and I knew it galled her because our finances were always separate. I was happy. The money I put into a savings account for any future grandchildren. But the thing I was most happy about was, as part of the final decree that we had agreed to in the settlement, she was supposed to retake her maiden name back as her legal name. I wanted to be completely done with her. I know I should have just done a simple split and moved on, but the pain and humiliation for the unmerciful way she destroyed my esteem made me feel justified. Now, 5 years later, my anger had abated, and I agreed with my son that his expectation that both his parents could act like adults at our grandchild's birthday party wasn't unreasonable. Plus, he said the entire family was fed up with having to coordinate things so the infantile exes didn't have to see each other. He was being polite, because everyone really meant it was just me that was being infantile. I was always proud of him, and I think a father is most proud of his children when he is confronted with the truth and recognizes that his child is correct and he is wrong. I don't know if the same is true for mothers. So that brings us to today, as I am standing in my son's expansive backyard, already filled with entertainment devices that number 2-year-old could possibly master. But it is an exceptionally good family yard. For some reason, it gives me feelings of hope. I have a light beer in my hand waiting for my ex to make her appearance. I had gone for a double scotch on the rocks, but my daughter-in-law gave me the stink eye, so I settled for the beer. Again, based on what was to come, it was probably a better choice. Maybe Kathy will chicken out? That's doubtful, because she has wanted to talk for years. Interestingly, I don't feel any of the anxiety and anger I've felt in the past when I thought of her. Maybe it was time. As I was reveling in the backyard's ambience, I saw her come in. She still looked beautiful. My heart didn't skip a beat or anything, but I did smile involuntarily. I quickly looked around, embarrassed to see if anyone saw my expression. She seemed a little nervous, but nevertheless made her rounds to the family and spent some time on one knee talking to the birthday boy. I couldn't tell if she had seen me yet, but I assumed not. So, I just kept to myself, staring at something resembling a jungle bin. The only thing was, it looked way too safe for a boy to be interested in playing on it. Nearing the end of my inspection, I was disappointed to conclude that there was not even one single way for a kid to injure themselves on it. I heard her voice. Hello, Ben. How have you been? I turned to her. Yes, she definitely looked good. I stared at the Manhattan, her favorite drink, in her hand. It wasn't even in a coupe, but a tall bar glass. They made me get a light beer, as I lifted my bottle into her field of vision. Oh well, I sighed. I've been good, Kathy. There was a bit of an uncomfortable pause, then for some reason I blurted out, You never had your name changed back like you agreed to? Surprisingly, she didn't burst into tears and run out of the party. She merely responded calmly. So, sue me. It's not like you haven't done it before. I didn't have it changed because I still consider you my husband even if in your eyes and the laws I'm not. I couldn't help myself. I had to laugh. She used to make me do that a lot. Okay, Kathy Benson it is then. You know I have been keeping tabs on you. She offered unapologetically. That raised my eyebrows and my hackles. No, I didn't know that. I snapped at her. She waved me off with a brush of her hand. Oh, don't worry, it's not anything, Sub Rosa. I met your friend Dr. Brown. We have talked quite a bit the last couple of years or so. Actually, we've developed a bit of a bond. It might be too soon to say we are friends, but I think we are good for each other. I was beginning to believe our meeting today may have been a very poor idea. She noticed my expression. Please don't be angry with her. I begged her not to tell you. I know you two are good friends, and I didn't want to ruin that. I just wanted to try to understand how I could have done what I did to you, to us. Honestly, we don't even discuss you. We are just trying to help each other. She expressed sincerely. Wow, weird, I should be very upset, but I'm not. I thought. I'm not angry with you, Kathy. Have you two made any progress in your understanding? I quizzed without a trace of rancor. Some, but it is a work in progress. She is quite a woman. She told me that you saved her life. No, I didn't. She saved herself. I just provided the opportunity for her to do so. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I am truly interested in understanding more about what happened. Or more accurately, why. I surprised even myself with how calm I was. Would you like to sit down and talk some? Kathy had to choke back her emotions. Yes, Ben, I would very much like to talk about it. We found an unoccupied table as far from the crowd as we could and sat facing each other. Before we start, Kathy, just promise me no matter what, you won't lie to me. We have too much of a history together, and we're too old to play any more games. If you ever had any love, any respect, any feelings for me at all, just please don't lie to me. She was already crying. It seems that if there is one thing I am good at, it is making women cry. She nodded her head definitively and spoke softly. I promise. She pulled out a handkerchief, wiped her eyes, and blew her nose. Not very ladylike, and it drew attention from the gathered partiers. I couldn't help it. I smiled at her. You know, the handkerchief thing always bothered me. Even when we first met, I thought. Here was this beautiful, self-confident young woman, a woman who knew what she wanted in life. She was so gorgeous, charming, and feminine. You were always an attention-getter, from both sexes. You were so special, and yet you blew your nose like a cigar-chomping fat middle-aged truck driver in a restroom at the local truck stop. Some things never change, I guess. We both cracked up and laughed uncontrollable for about 5 minutes. I'm sure the family went from being worried we would kill each other to thinking we were crazy almost instantly. But it did break the ice for us. When we had finally calmed, Kathy went first. Ben, I don't want to pry into your personal life, but Lena is very fond of you. She's quite attached, and it makes me jealous. I know I don't have the right to feel that way, but I do. She was nervous, but not being accusatory. How come you never married her? My instinct was to respond with something along the lines of, none of your damn business. But instead I opted for sincerity and openness with the understanding that it was past time to do so. Kathy, Lena and I are really good friends. We do a lot of couples things together, and she gives me peace and comfort. Believe it or not, but in the 5 years I have known her, we have been intimate less than a handful of times. That's not what our relationship is about. I will never ask her to marry me, partly because I don't want to risk ruining a beautiful friendship, but mostly because of what she did. I hoped I wasn't hurting Kathy, but I had to be truthful. I was destroyed by what you did to me. Lena told me that evening and a couple of times since that if that piece of crap asked her to, despite everything that she suffered, she would have sex with him on the 50-yard line during halftime at the Super Bowl. I can't risk having that happen to me again. I just can't. I hesitated, unsure of the impact my words were having on her. I continued. You probably don't know it. Our kids certainly don't. Nor will they ever. But I went through 2 years of therapy trying to understand what happened to me that evening. I know I reacted calmly and as if I was in control, but in reality, I was devastated. Did Lena tell you how often Loverboy pulled that stunt? and the Foundation's reaction to it? Yes, but Ben, I never fooled myself. Even while I was standing there with him falling under his spell, I understood what the reality was. He didn't get me into his bed by telling me lies, in which he had found his soul mate in me. He never said it's our destiny to be together for the rest of our lives and travel the world in luxury. He simply told me that if I spent the weekend with him, he would promise me the best sex of my life. He told me that when I drew my last breath on earth, our weekend together would be foremost on my mind. That's all, and for some reason, even 5 years of therapy haven't provided me an answer for. I agreed to it. Well, was it? Was it the best sex of your life? This was a moment of truth. Kathy never even hesitated. There would be no more lies, at least from her. Yes, Ben, it was. I know that hurts you, and I'm terribly sorry, but I won't lie to you ever again. The truth of the matter is, nothing can compare to it, and before you ask, I would like to think if he came for me again I would say no, but I couldn't promise that to you. In fact, I spent the next several months after I knew you were gone, and not coming back looking for the deep sensual emotion I had discovered that weekend. I'm afraid I did some shameful things. Lena, who did the same, called it the search for the endless pleasure. Thank you for being honest. It does hurt, but I think a lie right now would have hurt more. I have another hard question for you. Candidly, Kathy, over the years I have actually come to understand why you might have wanted to go with Collins. Lena and I have discussed her reasoning, or lack thereof, for her actions. I think I have gotten past that part, and maybe if that is all there was to it, we could have worked our way through it somehow. God, I know. Lena told me about your feelings about what was happening earlier in the party. I put my hand up with the international symbol for stop. What I will never be able to get past. And honestly, the reason we will never get back together is the way you did it. Oh, I understand why the shithead told you to do it that way. He got off on the humiliation factor for the poor sap of a husband. But how could you walk up to your devoted and loving husband of 25 years, the father of your children, the man who celebrated every success with you, the man who held you and wept with you at every failure and pain you ever felt in your adult life, and in a public setting and tell me you were going to take a lover and screw each other's brains out all weekend long? Then return to me and expect to have our life go on as if nothing of significance had occurred? Now I was the one close to tears. What possessed you? You couldn't even discreetly come to me alone and talk about it private? She stood silent and frozen for a full minute. She didn't cry, though. Maybe she didn't have any tears left. I don't know, Ben. I honestly don't know. I could give you all the standard crap about me being worried about growing old, you neglecting me, hormone imbalances, etc. But none of that bullshit was true. That's what is killing me. 5 years later, and I don't know how I could do that to you. He simply told me that was the way we had to do it. That it would be best for everyone. So I did it. When he said it, it just made sense. So that's what I did. I knew I was hurting you, but I honestly thought we could work past it. When he took me home that Sunday night, and yes, he took me home. He was a perfect gentleman, but he ended it by literally flipping on a light switch in his suite and told me that it was time for him to get me home. Before I got out of the car in front of our house, he thanked me for a great time and kissed me on the cheek, and it was over and done. That's how I felt too. It was over. When I came home, I honestly thought you would be waiting for me. When I realized you were gone, I actually got angry with you for running out on me. Can you believe that? It's why I fought the divorce so hard. I was going to make you pay. Nice touch on the alimony thing, by the way. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Kathy, you aren't some high school dropouts living in a single wide trailer working part-time at King Super. You have an advanced finance degree and practically run a Fortune 500 company, for Christ's sake. She didn't answer. There was no fight left in her. She was exposed, no part of her hidden from me. I have never seen her look so vulnerable. The answers to my questions might never come because she truly didn't know them. How is that even possible? What do you want from me, Kathy? She was almost begging. Ben, I want you to save me too. You did it for Lena, and she did the same thing as I did. And you were with her. I just want to be back in your life. I can accept us never being married again, even living together, but I can't live with you not being in my life. It's killing me that I made us strangers. Up until today, I would have snapped out the obvious response, because I was never married to her. But I decided to remain silent. I had no idea how long we had been sitting and talking. I looked around the backyard, and we were the only ones left. The sun was starting to set to the west. I briefly thought, the party is either over, or we scared everyone inside. Kathy seemed not to notice. She was still lost in her thoughts about the choices she had made. What did I want? That was the most prevalent thought on my mind. I had been asked several times over the years by well-meaning friends and family, not to mention my counselors, Are you better off with her in your life or out of it? My resounding response has always been, out of it. But now I'm not so sure. The truth is I miss her. I miss holding each other in bed, winding down as we would talk about our days and our children. I miss laughing together at life's comedy going on around us. I miss the smell of her perfume. I miss seeing her naked wearing only that silly locket. I miss everything. We were perfect once. It would never be again. But then life lived in absolutes is a life wasted. I can do friends, Kathy. Why don't we make a standing date to have dinner once or twice a month? I think we still have a lot to think and talk about, including making up for the time we have lost. Well, I'll be damned. She did have some tears left in her. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I, 66 female, have 2 children, Benjamin, 36 male, and Jack, 33 male. Jack is in a good place in his life. He has a good job with a senior position in his industry, a long-term fiance, and a wide circle of friends. And while they're still renting, they're both currently saving for a house deposit. Benji, on the other hand, despite being the oldest, has not done as well in life. Benji's never had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, has no friends that he visits. He didn't give university a try, but left both times in his first year due to anxiety. Today he chooses not to work. Benji and I have been living alone for the last 6 years, and I support him financially. I know that the situation is not ideal. However, I've long since come to terms with the fact that Benji's a square peg trying to fit in a world of round holes. And as I'm getting older, I'm happy for his company. It's an arrangement that suits us both. I'm starting to get on in years, and recently my thoughts have turned to my children and what they'll do after I'm gone. I decided to update my will a few months ago and asked Jack for a meeting to address the changes. I let him know that in my updated will, almost all of my assets, both cash and property, will be going to Benji. However, I'll be giving him a cash amount to help with his house deposit, £10,000. My reasoning for this is that I know full well Jack can look after himself after I'm gone, but Benji will always struggle without assistance. He's simply never going to have what Jack has. Jack did not take the news kindly. He says I'm effectively punishing him for succeeding in life, whereas his brother has been allowed not to try and fail his entire life and is now being rewarded for choosing to remain an infant so he can suckle on mommy's breast. He said some more unkind things about his brother, and at that stage, I said it was better that he leave until he could calm himself down. On the way out the door, he told me that this was not about money or assets, but was yet another instance of me favoring and coddling Benji the way I've done his entire life. Not true, and claimed we were in an emotionally enmeshment relationship. I told him to get out. This all went down 3 months ago, and since then, Jack will no longer accept my calls. He ignored my 66th birthday outright, not even a card, and at this stage, I'm not expecting to see him at all for Christmas, so it'll just be Benji and me as usual. Other family members have since become aware of the drama and are telling me that my decision is wrong and that by doing this, I'm driving a wedge further between Jack and Benji when their relationship is already strained. Am I the idiot for my decision? I love both my children equally, but I can't go to my grave knowing that Benji will be out on the streets suffering without me. I know that Jack will never have to struggle like Benji, so I don't even know why he even needs the money in the first place. I'm frankly disgusted by his greed and lack of concern for his brother's future. You are the idiot. Complete idiot. You can't give one child more because the other becomes self-sufficient. You picked a favorite. That's how your son Jack feels. You've likely lost Jack, but you don't care, do you? As long as you have Benji. What makes you think Benji will make good choices after you pass just because you gave him everything? Furthermore, once he's finished making all the wrong decisions that mommy's money will allow and has nothing left, what happens to him then? If OP's concern is really Benji's long-term well-being, right now in the will, she divides the whole estate equally, including the sale money from the house. After all, it is far too big for OP's favorite son to stay in it alone and put Benji's share of the money into a trust managed jointly by a lawyer and Jack. Also, OP is 66, not 95. Benji's 36. He should be made to get a job, earn an income, and pay rent and bills. I doubt OP's estate, even if it's all given unfairly to Benji, would be enough to support both OP and Benji for the next 25 to 30 years. Plus Benji on his own for another 30 years after that. I'm betting OP isn't going to change the will, and it's likely Benji's going to blow through that cash on drugs and God knows what else in weeks. This house will be foreclosed on. OP, you're setting Benji up for failure because you refuse to make him face being an adult. You're making sure your kids will never have a relationship with each other or any support because of the resentment you're causing. My daughter Gigi is always stirring up drama. She was a tattletale as a child and has unfortunately not grown out of it in her 30s. Gigi had this one-sided feud with my daughter-in-law Deb, It's gotten worse because Gigi and her son, Max, preschooler, moved in recently. I will spend my breakfast and dinner listening to how much Gigi hates Debbie. Debbie's a career woman, and I don't know if grandchildren are in her future. We don't ask, but this one-sided feud is caused by how Debbie hasn't given my son a child yet, and how Debbie is selfish. Now, Gigi told us that she's pregnant again. This is shocking for several reasons, but mainly because I've never even heard of my daughter having a boyfriend. In the 2 weeks that Gigi announced her pregnancy, no father's been mentioned. I asked Gigi if it was a Christmas miracle about her pregnancy, and she went off on me, saying that at least I'm not like Debbie and being selfish by not giving you grandbabies. I was in a short temper, and I told her, everyone likes Debbie more than you because she's just not such a miserable cow all the time. I would rather have a Debbie move in with me than you or your babies, because at least Debbie will work her butt off to help provide for the family. Gigi's upset because I'm not, quote, happy for her and my new grandbaby, who will now be stuck living with me. My wife thinks I'm such an idiot for saying that, and I should be happy for Gigi and not praise Debbie too much, because it makes Gigi do stupid things, like trying to get pregnant to one-up Debbie. I think this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I refuse to apologize to Gigi for what I've said. If she doesn't like it, she can move out. Not the idiot, OP. Your daughter sounds exhausting, self-centered, and honestly super shallow. Maybe your son doesn't want kids. Maybe Debbie doesn't want kids. Maybe Debbie can't have kids or your son. Either way, it's none of Gigi's business. If the only praise she can think of for her self-worth is that she can pop babies out, unlike Debbie, I'm terrified of the conditions those children will grow in. If she's trying to gain your approval by one-upping your daughter-in-law and getting pregnant, she must not know you very well. Your wife thinks you should not praise Debbie too much because it makes Gigi do stupid things, like try to get pregnant to one-up Debbie? I'm sorry, what? That sentence was so bonkers. Your wife is unhinged, and so is Gigi. The time has come. The day has arrived. The reality train is at the station. I'd be fuming if Gigi was my daughter. 100% Gigi is jealous of Debbie's life as a career woman with money who lives with her husband and not her parents while in her 30s. Gigi is a straight-up bitter hater. I tell her that it's time for her to move out and think about running her own household and providing for her children. It sounds like she doesn't have a plan to do any of these things, and she hates Debbie for having a job and proving that it's possible. Gigi needs a serious wake-up call. I, 18 female, am feeling torn about a situation that happened this past weekend. My stepdad is a huge football fan, and every Sunday, he has his buddies over to watch the game. It's been a tradition for years. I was asked to bring them snacks and drinks throughout the evening. This is something I've always done, so I didn't think much of it. However, this time things took an uncomfortable turn. While I was serving them, a couple of my stepdad's friends started making comments about my appearance. They said things like, my breasts are really coming in, and that I've turned into a real hottie. I was shocked and didn't know how to react. But what made it worse was my stepdad's response. Instead of defending me or telling them to stop, he agreed with them and added that I was a real hottie indeed. I was so upset and disgusted, not just with his friends, but more so with my stepdad, for not only tolerating this behavior, but participating in it. In the heat of the moment, I stormed out of the house and went to stay at a friend's place. I didn't feel comfortable or safe being around them after those comments. I've been staying with my friend for the past few weeks. Now my mom is angry with me. She thinks I overreacted and that I should have just ignored them. She says that's how men are, and I shouldn't have been rude by storming out, especially in front of my stepdad's friends. My mom believes I should apologize to my stepdad for embarrassing him. I feel like what I did was justified, but my mom's reaction is making me second-guess myself. So your stepfather and his friends harassed you, and your mom is taking his side? You are not the idiot at all. That's just how men are? Well, you're the sort of person who gets upset and storms out. It's just how you are. Mom should just ignore it. Sounds like your stepdad and his friends are creeps. The fact that they felt comfortable saying those things out loud in front of you is concerning. You are not the person who should be apologizing. Judging by Mom's reaction, I have a pretty good idea where this is headed. Just wait for OP's next post. My mom wants to throw me out of the house because she says I'm trying to steal her husband. Your stepdad and his friends were ridiculously inappropriate, and shame on your mother for enabling them. Leaving was more than justified. It was 100% the correct thing to do. Do not serve these morons ever again. If your mother has an issue with it, she can figure it out on her own, or maybe pick up a tray herself. I hope she doesn't though, because these clods should serve themselves. Do not back down on this. He is trash, and you don't give trash the time of day. Never mind serve it and its friends. My ex-wife, 28, Jane, and I, 28 male, divorced 4 years ago after 8 months of marriage. She was caught cheating on me. We didn't have any kids. When we divorced, I became depressed and focused on spending time on my project. And after years of struggling financially and mentally, I managed to start my own business. I'm doing quite well financially, and a year ago, I met Aisha, 25 female. We've been dating ever since, and I'm so happy to have her in my life. Jane got married a few years ago and has 3 kids, but her husband left her, and she's a single mother now. She's struggling financially to raise her kids. I feel bad for her because, despite her cheating on me, she was my first love, so I offered to help her out. I've been sending her money every month since last year and would sometimes look after her kids. Aisha found out about this last week and blew up on me. She said what I'm doing to her is also considered cheating and wants me to stop because she doesn't feel comfortable. She asked me if Jane had tried flirting with me, and I said yes, but I set boundaries and told her that I wasn't interested in a relationship with her. This angered Aisha, so she dumped me. I was planning to propose next month, and my whole world disappeared in a second. I tried reaching out, but Aisha's not responding. My friends who like Aisha are disappointed in me. They called me the idiot for helping out Jane, because I don't owe her anything, and she's taking advantage of me. Am I the idiot? I don't get it. You were married to someone for 8 months. She cheats on you, and then you pay her? What the heck? Why? You owe this woman nothing. You're sacrificing your relationship to fund your ex-wife? Because everything about this is so wildly dumb. You are the idiot. She cheats on you and is rewarded for her behavior by getting monthly payments? Insane. This completely OP. Why are you supporting your ex-wife who cheated on you and her 3 kids by another man? Why doesn't she go after him for child support? And you've been supporting her since last year? The fact your ex doesn't feel shameful or embarrassed taking your money is telling. Of course she flirted with you because she sees you as a meal ticket that she can use and abuse. Where's your self-respect? If someone cheated on me, I'd certainly not help them financially, regardless of their circumstance after the breakup. I'm not surprised Aisha dumped you. If I were in her shoes, I'd be upset, angry, and baffled by your behavior, and suspect that you're sleeping with your ex, plus disgusted at you for being a doormat. You're still emotionally pining for your ex-wife. Aisha's correct. You were cheating on her. My ex and I have been together for 2 years and moved in together for nearly a year. She was 32 female, so I knew she was really serious about starting a family. I, 30 male, also want a family, but I wasn't in a position to start one as I worked a minimum wage job, $16 an hour, which wasn't enough to pay for an apartment by myself or really enough to live on. She was in a middle management role and used to be an accountant, so she made 6 figures. She paid for more of the joint expenses, like food and housing, but I contributed what I could. I didn't have any savings even with her help, and before we dated, I was making it paycheck to paycheck with 3 roommates. I do have a degree in political science, but have never been able to find a job that required one. I had found a job that paid $24 an hour, doing government reception work, but it was a maternity placement, so I only stayed 6 months. My ex's family really liked me and treated me well, but I'm not sure if they like me or just like that I'm a man that could have a child with her. She admitted her parents are super obsessed with her having kids, and while she wants them too, she feels rushed by them. In retrospect, I think she settled for me because we were friends before that, and I think she knew I had a crush on her, but didn't say anything. She was in another relationship before me, and I think they were talking about engagement, and he didn't want anything like that. Anyway, my ex broke up with me a few months ago. She told the landlord that she wouldn't renew the lease and gave me 2 months to move, telling me we were over. I was shocked and felt it came out of nowhere. I asked her why, and she admitted she didn't want to be the sole breadwinner and that I wasn't really homemaker material, so she didn't want to struggle through life doing everything. I do my share of the housework, and I can cook. My cooking isn't as good as hers, but I do 3 nights of cooking a week. We didn't talk about this, and I felt she decided for both of us. I told her she never said she felt bothered by my pay, and she knew I didn't make much before we started dating. She admitted she thought she could handle it, but knowing we both rely on her income is stressful, and I'm not career focused, so she would need to be the breadwinner, and it's not what she wanted. I didn't have a choice as she said she was already looking into another apartment, and I couldn't afford this one myself, so we parted and broke up a week ago. I'm temporarily living with my mom, as I can't find a place in my price range. Her mom called me on Saturday and asked why we broke up, and I probably should have said something like, "We're incompatible," but I was pretty hurt and felt like I had no one to talk to, so I just told her everything my ex had said. She called me last night to yell at me for telling her mom because her mom demanded she get back together with me to have kids, as she's getting endlessly pestered by her that she's so old and not going to be able to have kids. I just hung up and felt a little bad because I kind of knew the situation, but I felt like if her mom asked, I could answer truthfully. But am I the idiot here? Not the idiot. You were honest. As long as you didn't lie, exaggerate, omit important details, or otherwise misrepresent what happened. If the truth is a problem for your ex, that's her problem, not yours. And even if you were still together, I think lying to her mom would have not been okay. She needs to figure out how to create healthy boundaries with her parents. This really has nothing to do with you. This is an issue that your ex needs to handle with her family, especially her mom. Come on, dude. You're not career focused? What does that even mean? Dude, figure out something. Trade school, whatever, and better yourself. A lot of women don't mind if you don't make as much, but they do care if you don't have any direction or goals in life. Best of luck to you. Yep, poor woman doesn't want to do everything. Breadwinner and do the chores on top? OP, in his own words, is not good at homemaker stuff and only cooks 3 nights a week. I'm sorry, but it sounds like a mooch. No one is good at those skills. You improved those skills. She doesn't want to support a guy and also do the heavy load when they're kids. She did the smart thing. Who cares what her mother thinks? She could go to a sperm bank and have less work than to provide for OP. Get your crap together or die alone and unloved. Your pick.
Jason looked up, intrigued. Really? Yeah. I didn't know she was into holding hands and kissing clients. Jason frowned. What are you talking about? Ron's expression grew serious. I wish I were joking. I saw Karen with some guy on Riverside Drive. They were kissing and all over each other. Jason's heart dropped. No way. Are you sure it was her? Ron asked, showing Jason a photo. It was Karen. Jason stared, stunned. Can you send me that? Ron quickly sent the photo. So what now? Jason was lost for words. I don't know, man. This is way more than I expected. Ron suggested a private investigator. I can hook you up if you want. Do it, Jason replied. I need answers. Afterward, Jason returned home, where Karen was already in the kitchen. You're home early, he said, kissing her. Not complaining, just surprised. She kissed him back, smiling. Where were you? Having a beer with Ron, Jason said. Didn't think you'd be home yet. Everything okay with him? She asked. Not exactly, Jason replied. He found out his friend's wife is cheating. Karen's interest piqued. Really? Yeah, Jason said, trying to gauge her reaction. He saw her kissing a guy today. Karen briefly flinched but quickly recovered. Maybe he's mistaken. Jason stared at her, unsure. I'm just glad I don't have that problem. She relaxed. I'd be devastated if that happened to me. Jason, feeling uneasy, kissed her forehead. I'm glad to hear that. I love you, Jace, she whispered, pulling him close. Jason sensed the tension but chose not to confront her yet. He wasn't ready. So, why are you home so early? He asked, changing the subject. The conference is this weekend, she replied brightly. I thought I'd pack and spend time with you before I leave. Where's the conference this year? Jason asked, feigning casual interest. Las Vegas, she said, at the Westgate Resort. I've heard it's nice. 4 stars, right? Yeah, she smiled. I'm really looking forward to it. But we do get some free time, too. When do you leave? Jason asked, trying to figure out their time together. Friday, right after lunch, she said. Did you win another award this year? Jason asked, knowing how successful she was. I think so, she shrugged. They haven't announced it, but I'm pretty sure. They kissed again, but Jason's mind stayed on edge. Her behavior had been off lately, and he couldn't shake the suspicion that she was hiding something. Why don't I walk you upstairs and congratulate you on another great year? Jason suggested, pushing his doubts aside, for now. She smiled, taking his hand. I was wondering when you'd offer, she teased. That evening they were intimate, but Jason couldn't shake his growing suspicions. Was she planning something while away this weekend? He wondered if the conference would be the turning point. Hey, I've got some time off coming up, Jason said, trying to lighten the mood. Why don't I come with you to Vegas? We could relax and maybe reconnect. Our 10th anniversary is coming up, he added, hoping to salvage something. That sounds fun, Karen replied, but I'll be busy with seminars and work afterward. Jason felt disappointed, but hid it. All right, maybe we can celebrate when you get back. I'll miss you, she smiled. The next morning, Jason contacted Ron for the private investigator's details. After setting up a meeting, he went to meet the investigator before lunch. Good morning, Mr. Chandler, greeted Jerry, the investigator, a middle-aged man with a weathered face. Jason explained his concerns about Karen's Vegas trip. Vegas, huh? Jerry raised an eyebrow. You think she's meeting someone? I'm not sure, Jason admitted. I've got some contacts there, Jerry said. We can keep an eye on her. If you want, we can even plant a camera in her hotel room, but that'll cost extra. I need to know the truth, Jason replied calmly. Jerry handed him a voice-activated recorder. Put it under her car seat. When she drives off, turn it on. We'll handle the rest. Good, Jason said, taking the recorder and a contact number. He paid with money he had saved for a vacation, money now redirected for another purpose. Later, Karen finished packing and Jason helped her with the bags. That's a lot of stuff for a weekend, he remarked, noticing the packed bags. Curious, he opened one and found a container of birth control pills, only 10 left. Wait, didn't she say her tubes were tied? His mind raced. Then he found a mix of business clothes, tiny clubbing dresses, and lacy lingerie. One bikini was so revealing it was only ever seen online. Jason took photos with his phone. Later, he placed the recorder under her car seat and watched her drive away. This could be the last time we're together, he thought. At breakfast the next morning, Karen handed him her room number and promised to call each night. I love you, she said, kissing his cheek. I love you too, Jason replied, his mind elsewhere. He gave her the room number and called Jerry. I'll get to work on it, Jerry assured him. Later, Karen called from the airport. I'll check in once I'm settled. Thanks, Jason replied, his voice strained. I love you, she said, and he couldn't help but think, yeah, I miss you too, lying to my face. But he only said, I'll miss you too. When he looked up, his father stood in the doorway, concern in his eyes. You okay, son? His father asked. Jason sighed. I don't know, Dad. His father nodded and led him to the study. Jason explained everything he'd uncovered. That doesn't sound like her at all, his father said, disbelief in his voice. I can't imagine Karen doing this. Neither can I, Jason muttered. If you need anything, we're here for you, his father reassured him. Thanks, Dad, Jason said, grateful for his support. Later that afternoon, Jason left work early and headed to the airport to track down Karen's car. He found it parked in the short-term lot and retrieved the recorder. The car was exactly as he expected, clean and organized, just like Karen always kept it. On the drive home, his phone rang. Hey, baby, Karen's voice chirped. Just wanted to let you know I made it. I'm glad to hear it, Jason said, his tone steady. I'm getting settled in. I'll call you tonight. Love you. I love you too, he replied, though his heart wasn't in it. When he got home, he plugged in the audio recorder, hoping for silence. But halfway through, his world tilted on its axis. He could hear Karen's phone ring through the car's Bluetooth, the conversation clear. Hey, baby, a man's voice said. Hello, stallion, Karen responded with a flirtatious giggle. You're such a stud, Jason's heart dropped. What the hell is going on, he thought, stunned. I can't wait to see you again, the man continued. Last week was amazing. I'm glad you liked it, Karen giggled again. So, are we set for next week? Next week? Jason muttered in shock. Yeah, it's all set, the man replied. Did you tell your husband? Not yet, she said, sounding too calm. Don't worry, I've got it all under control. He doesn't know anything, right? Nope, Karen said, the words chilling. He's too oblivious. I can tell him anything and he'll believe it. Jason's hands clenched around the recorder. His thoughts spun. She's planning something next week and I'm not involved. This is the week of our 10th anniversary. The man's voice interrupted his thoughts. I'm almost at the airport now. I'll see you at the hotel tonight, okay? I can't wait, Karen replied, excitement in her voice. Bye, love. Bye, she said, ending the call. Jason sat motionless, staring at the recorder in disbelief. He played it again, hoping it was a mistake. But no, it was as clear as day. She was having an affair, and it wasn't a one-time thing. She was even planning something for their anniversary week. How long has this been happening? Who is this guy? He grabbed a beer from the fridge and slumped into his chair, trying to make sense of it all. Had he really been so blind to the signs? What else had she hidden from him? He had always respected Karen's privacy, but now everything had changed. He knew where she kept the key to her office, so he went to the bedroom and found it in a drawer in her jewelry box. With a sense of entitlement he had never felt before, he unlocked her desk and began to sift through the papers inside. He was shocked by what he found. Among the documents, he found bank statements. Karen had been saving far more than she ever admitted. She had over $250,000 hidden away, and it wasn't just money. It was the purchases that told a story. A receipt for a men's Rolex watch. Jason didn't remember ever receiving something like that. But maybe her lover did. She'd also bought revealing lingerie, items he'd never seen before. But it didn't stop there. Buried beneath the receipts was something that hit him like a ton of bricks, medical bills from Planned Parenthood. Karen had been pregnant twice in the last 2 years and had terminated both pregnancies, paying cash out of her personal account. Jason's stomach churned. Had one of those pregnancies been his? Then he found the receipt for Plan B pills, purchased just a few days earlier after one of their intimate nights. The final nail in the coffin came when he found a receipt for a large down payment on an apartment in an upscale neighborhood. Was she planning to move out, or was this where she and her lover would escape to? Jason's mind raced. He examined the keys on her key ring, wondering if one was for the apartment. He'd find out soon enough. He powered on her computer, determined to uncover whatever else she was hiding. The passwords list was his next target. Jason accessed Karen's computer and easily logged into her email. Scrolling through, he quickly discovered several messages from Greg Wilson that detailed their sexual encounters. Karen's responses were almost identical each time. The emails, some nearly a year old, lined up with the period when Jason had first noticed changes in Karen's behavior. Initially, their meetings had been in hotel rooms, but it seemed they'd later moved their trysts to houses Karen was selling. Then, Jason found an email from about 6 months ago that gave him a partial answer to a question that had been bothering him. "Did you take care of that little issue?" Greg had asked. "Yes," Karen replied. "I went and had an termination today." "Too bad you didn't keep him," Greg responded. "You could have passed him off as Jason's." "I can't do that," Karen replied. "He thinks I can't have kids. He'd know it wasn't his." Jason's mind raced. He remembered that conversation. It was around the time he'd caught her in a lie. "She's been lying to me for months," he thought, his anger boiling. What a deceitful, manipulative woman. The emails kept coming. At one point, Greg suggested they have sex in Karen's marital bed, but Karen shot down the idea. "I won't do that to Jason," she wrote. Greg persisted. "That idiot doesn't have a clue, does he?" "No," Karen responded. "I'm not doing that." Greg then proposed an idea. "What if you had your own apartment? You could use the commissions to pay for a place and Jason would never notice." Karen seemed to entertain the thought. "You might be onto something," she replied. "I have my own account and Jason never asks about it. I'll see what's available." That had been about 3 months ago. The receipt for the apartment down payment was just over a month old. "I bought a condo," she emailed him. "I made the down payment and new furniture is coming next week. Jason doesn't know anything." Greg's reply was enthusiastic. "Perfect. We'll have to break in every room." Jason leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. The whole situation was beyond what he could have imagined. He kept reading. Greg eventually asked, "Why stay with your husband? Why not just leave him and move in with me?" "I still have feelings for him," Karen responded. "He's a pain, but he treats me well. I bought the condo so we have a private place to meet without worrying about hotel rooms. Besides, you're still married." Greg then promised he'd leave his wife in a heartbeat if Karen asked him to. "We'll see after the conference," Karen said. Jason froze. What conference? He thought, a sick feeling in his stomach. He was about to print the emails and save the receipts when the phone rang. It was Karen. "Hey, baby," she said sweetly. "How's everything? You sound off." "I've got a terrible headache," Jason said, trying to keep his cool. "I just wanted to let you know I'm getting ready for bed," Karen said. "Take something for your headache and get some rest. I love you." "Yeah, me too," Jason muttered, hanging up quickly. He clenched his fist. She has no idea how close I am to exposing her. After the call, Jason decided he needed to find out more about this Greg guy. A quick search on Karen's work website revealed that Greg Wilson was her regional manager. So, she was having an affair with her boss. Jason printed the page, adding it to the pile of evidence. But he couldn't calm down. He needed answers, and he was going to find them. He checked the address for Karen's new condo and found a series of numbers listed under alarm system in her paperwork. Of course she wrote it down, he thought, grabbing latex gloves from the garage. He wasn't leaving any trace. He found the apartment complex easily and parked in her spot. With gloves on, he tried the key that matched and stepped inside. He quickly disabled the alarm using the code he'd found. The place was well decorated, and Jason had to admit, Karen had good taste. Too bad her loyalty isn't as strong as her design skills, he muttered. Of course, there were no photos of him. This was clearly her getaway, a place to escape their marriage. As he wandered through, he noted that there was nothing in the fridge, and the pantry was empty. The apartment was furnished with sleek, modern pieces, and the living room had a large, flat-screen TV. When he entered the bedroom, he immediately noticed the lace curtains she loved, hanging elegantly down to the floor. He glanced down, noticing that the curtains were hanging over the electric heater, and wondered if she'd ever considered the fire risk. He opened the dresser drawers, finding lingerie he'd never seen, as well as men's underwear. He took pictures with his phone, documenting everything. In the nightstand, he found a card from Greg. It read, Thanks for the watch. Can't wait for your housewarming party. Love, Greg. Fury surged through him. He took a few more pictures, including shots of the toothbrushes in the bathroom and the for him and for her towels on the rack. This was a full-fledged affair. In the second bedroom, there was a desk with some utility bills addressed to Karen. Jason photographed them, noting the address. The windows here were also covered with lace curtains, again hanging over the heater, a fire hazard. He also spotted safety issues. A very old smoke detector in the kitchen and none in the bedrooms. He made sure everything was exactly as it had been when he entered. Once he finished, he reactivated the security system, locked the door, and left. He sat in his car for a while, reflecting on what he had just uncovered. Divorce seemed inevitable now. Even if Karen ended things with Greg and sold the condo, he could never trust her again. Financially, he knew men often lost in divorce settlements, but he had an advantage. Karen made far more money than he did, and he hoped that would help him avoid paying alimony. He planned to consult a lawyer before making any moves, hoping the fact that the condo was only in Karen's name would mean he wouldn't have to sell their house or split it. She had already made it clear that she was no longer committed to their marriage when she secretly bought the condo. No kids meant no custody battles, but Jason still wanted to make sure Karen and Greg faced consequences for their betrayal. Jason had ruled out violence. He didn't want to end up in jail. Back at his place, he looked up Gregory Wilson in the phone book, hoping it was the same Greg. After dialing the number, a woman's voice answered. "Wilson Residence," she said. "Is this Mrs. Wilson?" Jason asked. "Yes, it is," she replied. "Who am I speaking with?" he pressed. "My name is Jason Chandler," he said. "Your husband is the regional manager at Acme Real Estate?" Jason asked. "Yes, he is," she answered. "But he's at a conference this weekend and will be visiting other offices next week. You'll need to contact the regional office and leave a message there." "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, I'm hoping to speak with you," Jason said. "Oh?" she responded, sounding surprised. "Yes, ma'am," Jason continued. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. My wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you sure about that?" she asked, clearly taken aback. "I'm certain," Jason said, "and I can prove it." "Do you have solid evidence?" she inquired. "I can even show you where they meet if you'd like," Jason offered. He could hear her sigh on the other end. "Would tomorrow work?" she asked after a pause. "Sure," Jason replied. "What time is good for you?" "Let's say 1 p.m., she suggested. Jason gave her the address to Karen's apartment and offered clear directions. "I'll see you then," he said, ending the call with a sense of satisfaction. Once the conversation was over, he sat at his desk and made a to-do list. The first item was clear: change the locks. He planned to get that done before meeting Greg's wife. Though he briefly considered getting drunk, he quickly pushed the thought aside. He grabbed a cold slice of pizza instead, using the time to mentally prepare for what lay ahead. Once finished, he climbed the stairs to bed. The next morning, Jason woke up early, headed to the hardware store, and bought everything he needed to change the locks, as well as a copy of the key to the apartment. By noon, the locks were all replaced. After a quick shower, he grabbed his audio recorder and the printed emails from Karen's account. He was ready to meet Greg's wife. Upon arriving at Karen's apartment, he noticed a woman in a Toyota Corolla nearby. He approached the car and knocked on the window. The woman rolled it down and looked at him. "Are you Christy Wilson?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "You must be Jason Chandler," she replied. "Yep, that's me," he said, opening the car door for her. "Come with me and I'll show you where they've been meeting." "Just put these on first," Jason added, handing her a pair of latex gloves. "I don't want any fingerprints left behind." "Good idea," she agreed, slipping the gloves on. They walked toward the door, and Jason used the new key to open it. The security alarm deactivated as they stepped inside. Jason led her through the apartment, opening drawers and a closet to reveal Greg's clothes. "Oh my God!" Christy gasped, her voice trembling. "I've been looking for these clothes for weeks. I had no idea where they were disappearing to." "Has he been wearing a Rolex lately?" Jason asked. Christy nodded. "Yes, he said it was a gift from his company." Jason shook his head and pulled out a card from Karen's nightstand. He opened it and showed it to her. Christy read the note, her eyes welling up with tears. "Is this his handwriting?" Jason asked. "Yes," Christy sobbed. Jason then pulled out the emails he had printed, turned on the recorder, and played the audio from the previous Friday. "I'm sorry about all of this," Jason said, offering her a sympathetic hug. She wiped her tears. "It's not your fault," she replied. I've suspected something was going on, but I didn't have any concrete proof. After a while, Christy regained some composure and asked, So what's your plan? I'm divorcing her, Jason said bluntly. Are you? Christy asked, her voice firm. Because as soon as I see that fool, I'm throwing him out of the house. Christy suddenly stopped crying and gave him a sly smile. I've got an idea. What is it? Jason asked, intrigued. They want to live here together, right? She said. Why don't we help them out? Jason frowned, unsure. What do you mean? I mean, why don't we pack up their things and move them in here? She suggested, her tone filled with mischief. Jason thought for a moment and then grinned. I like that idea, but we better hurry. They'll be back in a day or two. She shook her head. Greg said he'd be gone for a week after the conference. I'm willing to bet Karen will find an excuse to leave too. Suddenly, Jason remembered the recorded conversation. Karen had asked him if he had everything ready for next week, but she hadn't specified what they had planned. Crap, he muttered, realizing she was probably right. I guess you're right. Still, I want her stuff out of my house as soon as possible. I'm with you, Christy said. Let's meet back here in 3 hours? Sounds good, Jason replied. I'll throw her things in trash bags. I'll be back in 3. See you then, Christy said, getting up. As Jason watched her leave, he couldn't help but notice her appearance. She was shorter than Karen, with a slender frame and a cute smile. He couldn't understand how Greg had cheated on this woman. They drove to their respective homes, then returned 3 hours later, their cars loaded with bags of Karen and Greg's belongings. They tossed the bags into the second bedroom, not bothering to care about anything breaking in the process. I didn't bother with Greg's stuff, Christy said nonchalantly. Me neither, Jason laughed. They shared a high five, and then Jason looked at her with a grin. I don't know about you, but I'm starving, he said. Same here, she replied. I could really go for a big, juicy burger. A big, fat cheeseburger sounds perfect, Jason said. I know just the place, she said. Let me treat you. Lead the way, Jason replied. They drove toward the bar he and Ron often visited. Once parked, Christy looked up at the building. A bar? She asked, skeptical. Trust me, Jason said. They make the best burgers around. You'll love it. All right, Christy said, still unsure. Just don't go pouring me booze and taking advantage of me. Jason laughed. As tempting as it sounds, I wouldn't do that to you. Damn, she said, laughing too. They entered the bar and ordered beers, burgers, and fries. As they ate, they exchanged stories about their failed marriages. Christy's story was strikingly similar to his. She had met Greg in college and they married soon after. But while she wanted children, he didn't. Greg started working at Acme Real Estate and Christy took a job in accounts receivable at a home remodeling company. Are you a CPA? Jason asked. She shook her head. No, I never got that far, but it's something I hope to do eventually. Jason shared a bit about his own work. We're always looking for good people. If you send me your resume, maybe we can help each other out. I can do that, Mr. Chandler, she replied, taking a bite of her burger. Just then, his phone rang. He saw it was Karen calling and answered in a neutral tone. Hello? He said. Hey, baby, Karen's voice slurred. She'd clearly been drinking. What are you up to? Just at the bar having a burger, Jason answered. Really? What's wrong with you? She asked. Guess what? I got the Best Salesman award. I'm happy for you, he replied, keeping his tone flat. They want me to stay in Vegas next week to work with the agents, she continued. Jason immediately knew she was lying. Isn't that great? They're even talking about promoting me to manager soon. Jason thought, of course, on her back. That's great, he said. What about our anniversary? It's coming up this Wednesday, she asked. I know, Jason said, but I understand. Maybe we can celebrate next weekend. Don't worry about it, he added. I know how important your work is. I wouldn't want you to miss anything big. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Nothing, he said, trying to keep it together. It's just that 10 years of marriage doesn't come around every day. But I understand how much your job means to you. Don't worry about it. Yes, my work is important, Karen said. But I thought you'd be happy for me. I'm very happy, Jason said. Go work with your agents. Don't worry about me. I love you, she said. Yeah, me too, he replied coldly. Bye, she added before ending the call. Jason looked over at Christy. So, that's that. Christy shook her head. She really chose Greg over your anniversary, she said, her hand resting on his. Jason fought back tears. A man he barely knew seemed to care more about him than his own wife did. What a witch, he muttered. I'm sorry, Christy said quietly. Thanks, Jason replied, attempting a weak smile. He pulled out Jerry's business card and dialed the private number. Jerry, he said when the older man answered. It's Jason Chandler. I just talked to Karen. She says she'll be in Vegas for another week. And you don't believe her? Jerry asked. Not for a second, Jason replied. I was just working on your report. I'll have my team watch them and see what they're up to. We'll move forward with it, Jerry said. I've also got something else for you. Your wife and her lover spent the night together. I've got video footage of it. I'll send it over if you want, and it'll be in the full report. Sounds good, Jerry, Jason said. Thanks. He ended the call and turned to Christy. Well, tomorrow we'll find out what's really going on, he said. They spent the night together. My private investigator is going to send me the footage. Would you like to watch it with me? Christy hesitated. Not really, she said. But I feel like I should. Jason nodded. Let's head to my place then. After paying for their meal, they left the bar and drove to Jason's house. By the time they settled into his office, the video had arrived in his email. Would you like something to drink before we watch this? Jason asked. Sure, Christy said. Coca-Cola, if you have it. I'll grab one for you, he replied, heading to the kitchen. He returned with 2 cold Cokes, handing one to her. He started the video, and they both watched in silence as Karen and Greg engaged in various sexual acts. Both Jason and Christy struggled to hold back tears as they saw their spouses enjoying each other's company. What followed was even worse, the pillow talk. So, what do you think our spouses are doing now? Karen asked. If I know Christy, she's probably watching some boring movie or reading one of her dumb books, Greg said. Yeah, I get what you mean, Karen agreed. I bet Jason's sitting there with his dumb spreadsheets or staring at stock reports, Greg continued. You'd think he was trying to save the world or something. Hell, his dad's company sells tires, for Christ's sake. What's so important about that? So, what are you going to say to that a-hole after the awards banquet tomorrow? Greg asked. I'll just tell him I have to stay in Vegas for a week to cover for the local reps. He'll believe it, Karen said. He'd believe anything I tell him. I could say the moon is made of green cheese, and he'd go along with it. And by the time he figures it out, we'll be on a beach in Hawaii, Greg said, grinning. I can't wait to see you in that new bikini you bought. Christy's face contorted with rage. Hawaii? She screamed. That fool's taking that promiscuous to Hawaii. I'm going to rip his balls off. She turned to Jason. Sorry for calling your wife a promiscuous? You don't have to apologize, Jason said coldly. I would have called her the same thing. They continued watching and Greg's voice came through again. What about your anniversary? Are you just going to blow it off? Hawaii's way more interesting than a night at a steakhouse, Karen said. I'll make it up to him later. Greg looked at her. You're cold, you know that. Karen shrugged. It's just our 10th anniversary. There'll be others. I don't care about that, she added. I need you now. With that, they began again, and Jason shut the video off. I've seen enough, Jason said. Christy nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. More than enough, she whispered. I'm meeting with a divorce lawyer on Monday, Jason said. Do you want to come with me? Do you mind? Christy asked quietly. Not at all, Jason replied. Christy broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Jason put his arm around her and let her cry on his shoulder, fighting his own emotions. He wanted to cry too, but he held back, comforting her the best he could. Do you mind if I stay here tonight? Christy asked. No, Zex. I just want to be held. Of course you can stay, Jason said. Stay as long as you need. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. I can't believe I spent all those years with him. I fell for all his lies. I know exactly how you feel, Jason replied. He led her upstairs to the master bedroom and found an old t-shirt for her to wear to bed. Christy took it and went into the bathroom to change. While she was gone, Jason changed into his pajamas, then climbed into bed. Christy emerged from the bathroom wearing the long t-shirt, and Jason almost gasped when he saw her. He'd always thought Karen had nice legs, but Christy's were the thinnest, most graceful legs he'd ever seen. She smiled as she slid under the covers. Something wrong? She asked. Never seen a woman's legs before? None as perfect as yours, Jason replied. Flattery will get you everywhere, sir, she teased, her voice light. He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her and inhaling the soft scent of her hair. She rested her hand on his chest, pressing herself closer. You're the only woman I've been in bed with for over 10 years. Besides my wife, he said, his voice almost a whisper. And you're the only man I've been with. Besides my husband, she replied, just as softly. They locked eyes, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, waking up the next morning tangled together. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Christy said, her voice still sleepy. Jason stirred and started to get out of bed to use the bathroom, but she added, "You don't have to get up on my account." "Good morning, beautiful," he replied, smiling. "I'll be right back." After a quick trip to the bathroom, which was harder than usual due to the state of his body, he returned to the kitchen. Christy had already cleaned up and was busy cooking scrambled eggs and bacon. Jason checked the clock. It was 8:30 a.m. He watched her move around in his oversized t-shirt and felt a pang of nostalgia for the mornings when Karen used to make him breakfast. "Damn, that smells amazing," he said, his stomach rumbling. "Hope you don't mind me making myself at home in your kitchen," she said, glancing over her shoulder at him. "Not at all," Jason replied, feeling strangely comforted. "I can't remember the last time someone made me breakfast." "Karen never cooked for you?" she asked, looking at him with a hint of curiosity. "She did at first," he said. "But after a while she stopped. Said it took too much time and she had to clean up for her clients." "Which?" Christy muttered, the words slipping out before she could stop herself. "I agree," Jason said, his voice dry. Christy plated a generous portion of bacon and eggs and set it in front of Jason. He dove into the meal like he hadn't eaten in days. "Damn, that was good. You cook like this every morning?" he asked, looking up at her. "Whenever I can," Christy replied with a grin. Just then, Jason's phone buzzed, breaking their quiet moment. He glanced at the screen and saw Jerry's name flashing. He picked it up. "Good morning, Jerry," Jason answered. "Working on a Sunday, huh?" Jerry's voice came through, accompanied by a laugh. "More than I'd like," Jason replied. "What's up?" "Just wanted to let you know your wife and her lover boarded their flight out of Las Vegas just before 6 a.m. They had a short layover in Los Angeles, but they're on their way to Honolulu now. They'll land in about 5 hours. I've got all the flight details if you want them." "Yeah, I'll take it," Jason said, his tone cold and controlled. "They're on American Airlines Flight 31, Jerry continued. "I have a contact in Honolulu who will track them when they land." "Thanks, Jerry," Jason said, jotting down the details. He hung up and turned to Christy. "Well, here we go. They're on their way to Hawaii," he said, his voice flat. Meanwhile, Karen was sitting back in her seat on the plane, staring out the window as the landscape below changed. The plane was cruising over the Pacific Ocean. This is it, she thought, a mix of excitement and guilt stirring inside her. She glanced over at Greg, who was already asleep beside her. For a moment, her mind wandered back to her marriage with Jason. She had been married for 10 years, and as she closed her eyes, the weight of what she was doing hit her hard. She thought about all the lies, the secrecy, and the betrayal of a man who had trusted her completely. The guilt gnawed at her for a moment, but then she pushed it aside. This was for me, she reasoned. It had to be. Eventually no one would know and everything would go back to normal. Jason wouldn't find out. We'd keep going just like before and someday we'd retire together. Her first lie had been telling Jason she couldn't have children. The truth was, she didn't want them. The thought of motherhood wasn't appealing to her at all, so she made up a story about medical issues. Jason believed her, and eventually, they both agreed not to have kids. She had complications with birth control, tried different methods, but in the end she ended up pregnant twice. The first time she had in termination. She paid for it with her own money, quietly and discreetly. Jason was none the wiser. The second time she got pregnant by Greg. Again she had in termination, and again she paid for it herself. She hoped Jason would never find out about either of them. As for the affairs, she had been faithful for the first 7 years of her marriage. But one day, everything changed. She met a charming, rich client, and before she knew it, they were in bed together. It wasn't something she did often, just a handful of times over the next year and a half. But it felt exciting, and she didn't feel bad about it. She justified it by thinking, if others can do it and get away with it, why can't I? Jason didn't need to know. She still loved him, and what he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Then, there was Greg. He was everything Jason wasn't. Jason was careful, calculating, a man with a set plan. Greg, on the other hand, was spontaneous, living for the moment. While Jason had spent his life working for his father, Greg was carefree, with no set career or future plans. But it wasn't just the differences in their lives that drew her to Greg. It was how he made her feel. Where Jason took his time and focused on her pleasure, Greg was quick, demanding, and raw. At first, their secret meetings were held at motels and hotels around town. or occasionally at the house they were trying to sell. But over time, she grew uneasy about being caught. Someone might see them and alert either Jason or Greg's wife, Christy. The tipping point came one night when Jason expressed his worry that their relationship was slipping away. Panicked, she pulled back from Greg, distancing herself emotionally. For a short time, she threw herself into her marriage, but it didn't last long. Greg, eager to start fresh, suggested they find a way to be together more openly, but she feared Jason might discover their affair. She needed a plan, so she decided to buy her own apartment. That way, she'd have a private space for her and Greg, separate from her life with Jason. Greg had suggested using the bed she shared with Jason, but she refused. Even though Jason could be boring and predictable, she still had lingering feelings for him. Besides, the two of them had long agreed to file their taxes separately, which meant she could move out and still maintain some financial benefits. She convinced herself it was a win-win situation. This thinking eventually led her to plan a trip to Hawaii with Greg. She took a week off from work, telling everyone she was going with Jason after their annual company conference. Meanwhile, Greg informed his wife of his own travel plans for the week. Karen, however, lied to Jason, telling him she was heading to Las Vegas. She was confident he wouldn't suspect anything. After all, a few phone calls would cover her tracks. Sure, she'd missed their 10th wedding anniversary, but she promised herself she'd make it up to him when she returned, keeping the secret safe. As the plane soared toward Hawaii, she smiled, thinking about the trip ahead. Greg had bought her a daring bikini for the occasion, one that left little to the imagination. He planned to watch her undress on the beach and even imagined how it might feel to be the center of her attention in that moment. The thought made her feel hot and aroused, and she almost gave in to the temptation to touch herself right then, though she resisted, deciding to wait until later. Checking her phone for any messages or calls, she wasn't surprised to see no texts from Jason. He hated texting and preferred talking on the phone or in person. She chuckled to herself, feeling the plane shake as they hit some turbulence. The nose of the plane dipped and the engine noise changed. Suddenly, she realized something was wrong when she saw the frantic movement of passengers around her. The plane was plummeting. Panic surged through her, and her heart raced. "Oh God," she thought. "This is it. We're going to crash. I'm going to die." Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, and the screams of other passengers filled the air. As the flight attendants rushed to prepare everyone for impact, Karen looked at her phone, tears streaming down her face. She made one final decision. Meanwhile, Jason and Christy had just finished breakfast and were cleaning up the kitchen when they sat down to discuss their next steps regarding their cheating spouses. Jason found himself impressed by Christy's practical and methodical approach to the situation. At that moment, he felt closer to her than he had to Karen in months. Just as he returned with a fresh cup of coffee, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Karen. "Hello?" he answered, putting it on speaker. "Jace!" Karen's voice came through, strained and filled with background noise. It sounded like a commotion was happening on her end. "Yeah, Karen, what's going on?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. Not time. Airplane, down." Her words were abruptly cut off by static and shouting. Before Jason could process what was happening, the line went dead. He stared at the phone in shock, then tried calling her back. The call went straight to voicemail. "Try Greg," he told Christy, who immediately grabbed her phone and called him. She came back a moment later, shaking her head. "Straight to voicemail," she said. Jason rushed to his home office, where he searched for the airline's number. After a few attempts, he finally reached someone who confirmed that they were investigating reports of a plane going down. He provided the details of both Karen and Greg's flights, leaving his contact information and asking to be notified when more details emerged. He also passed on Christie's information. He quickly checked online, but there was no breaking news yet. They walked back to the living room, where Jason flipped through TV channels, but there was nothing yet. His phone buzzed again, and he was soon greeted by a news report about an American Airlines flight to Honolulu, crashing into the Pacific Ocean. There were no specifics, just confirmation of the tragedy. Christy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, God," she whispered, eyes wide with shock. Jason held her tightly, hoping against hope that Karen had somehow survived. Despite everything she had done, he didn't want her to die. An hour later, Jason's phone rang again, interrupting their silent vigil. He turned off the TV and answered. "Mr. Chandler?" a woman's voice asked. "That's me," he said. "I'm calling to confirm that your wife's flight has crashed," she said, her tone somber. "I don't have any further details right now, but we'll get back to you as soon as we have more information." Thank you, Jason replied, his voice thick. He ended the call and hugged Christy again, tears welling in his eyes. Moments later, Christy's phone rang, and she received the same confirmation. Soon after, his father called. Jason wasn't surprised. His parents often reached out when a big news story broke. "Hey, Jace," his father said. "Hey, Dad," Jason replied. "How are you doing? I just got back from church," his father continued. "Did you see the news about the plane crash?" "Yeah, I saw it," Jason said. "It's terrible." "By the way, how's Karen doing? Isn't she on her way back from Vegas?" his father asked. Jason swallowed hard, the truth finally sinking in. "She's not doing so well right now, Dad. She was on that plane that crashed." "What?" his father gasped. "What was she doing in Hawaii without you?" "She was with her boyfriend," Jason said, his voice breaking. "Oh my God," his father said, his voice filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear that, son. Listen, take some time off and deal with all of this. I'll talk to Mike and let him know. If you need anything, just give me a call." "Thanks, Dad," Jason said softly, his mind reeling. Jason ended the call, his emotions swirling. He felt sadness knowing that Karen was likely gone. At the same time, anger burned within him, not just at her for the affair, but also at himself for not standing up to her. Oddly, he wasn't upset by the fact that her pass away meant there would be no divorce, but the realization hit him quickly. He would have to handle all of Karen's final expenses, including the apartment. Damn it, he thought. He turned to Christy, wondering how she would react to everything. What would she do next? A sudden idea popped into his mind, and he walked over to her. "Christy," he said, "how about you sell your place and move in here with me?" She looked up, her eyes red from tears. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yeah," Jason replied. "I've got an extra room upstairs, and you're going to have a lot to manage over the next few months. Maybe we can help each other through it." She paused, thinking it over. "Why not?" she said finally. "But there's one condition." "What's that?" he asked, puzzled. "You let me sleep with you?" she said softly. Jason blinked in surprise. Everything was moving so quickly, and he wasn't sure if this was the right choice, but then he pushed the doubt aside. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It's been years since I felt truly comfortable with my husband," she admitted. "But last night, for the first time in a long time, I felt satisfied. Is that okay with you?" "It's more than okay," Jason said, feeling an unexpected rush of relief. "Great," she said. "I'll go back to the house, grab my things, and be back tonight." "I'll be here," he replied. Once she left, Jason made a call to Lucy, the office manager where Karen worked. "Hello," Lucy answered. "Hi, Lucy, it's Jason Chandler." "Oh, hi, Jason," she replied. "How was Hawaii?" Jason hesitated, his throat tight. "I don't know. I heard it's nice there." Lucy was confused. "I thought you two were going after the company meeting?" "No," Jason corrected. "Karen went to Hawaii, but not with me. She went with Greg." "What?" Lucy exclaimed, clearly stunned. "Yeah," Jason said, "but neither of them made it. The plane they were on went down in the Pacific today. I'm sure you saw it on the news." "Oh my God," Lucy whispered. "Do you know if she—" "I don't think there are any survivors," Jason said flatly. "I'm so sorry," Lucy said, her voice filled with sympathy. "I'll take care of the insurance paperwork. The company carries life insurance on all employees, so I'll need some information from the airline. Can you get that for me?" "Yeah, I'll get what I can," Jason said, his mind elsewhere. "But I have to ask, did you know about Karen and Greg?" Lucy sighed. "I had a feeling something was going on. There were rumors, but we don't really talk about that kind of thing." "I see," Jason muttered. "That's all I needed to know. I'll be in touch." "Thanks for letting me know, Jason. And once again, I'm sorry for your loss," Lucy said before ending the call. Later that evening, while Jason and Christy were watching TV, a breaking news report flashed on the screen. It showed footage of the plane's final moments, captured by a nearby cargo plane. The video showed the doomed flight spiraling out of control, plummeting nose first before disintegrating on impact with the ocean. The crew of the cargo ship had turned around to search for survivors, but found none. Though they did recover bodies and a large amount of luggage, including Karen and Greg's things. However, neither of their bodies were found. In the months that followed, life for Jason and Christy was a blur of activity. Christy moved in with him and sold her house. Jason was left to deal with the aftermath of Karen's apartment, which held nothing of value to him. He donated everything to Goodwill and eventually sold the apartment, recouping the original amount Karen had paid for it. Both Jason and Christy received $500,000 insurance payouts from Acme Real Estate for the loss of their spouses. Christy quickly settled in, and they began to remove every trace of Karen from Jason's life. Photos were tossed, knickknacks were packed away, and all the furniture was replaced, especially the bed. Family members took what they wanted, and the rest, along with the cars, was either sold, donated, or scrapped. Then came the long process of sorting through Karen's bank accounts. After months of paperwork, Jason finally received a check for about $250,000. Meanwhile, lawyers began circling, hoping to cash in on the accident. An investigation later revealed that the flight crew had misinterpreted warning signals and made critical errors. The plane had been descending at a terrifying rate, 12,000 feet per minute, before it crashed into the ocean at around 135 miles per hour. The whole descent lasted just over 3 minutes. Jason couldn't help but imagine how miserable those last moments must have been for Karen, especially as she realized the enormity of the situation. In his mind, it was too little, too late. Fortunately, the airline settled with the families, providing each passenger's relatives with over $175,000. Jason and Christy ended up with more than $1.6 million. After taxes and other deductions, they still had a sizable fortune. With no bodies recovered, no funeral was held for Karen or Greg. Jason and Christy, however, hosted small memorials for their families. Neither of them shed a tear for their late spouses. 3 months later, Christy left her job and moved in with Jason permanently. By this point, their bond had deepened into a passionate relationship. One evening, while they were out for dinner at a Texas roadhouse, Jason took a deep breath, got down on one knee, and proposed. Christy gasped in joy, and the surrounding diners cheered. "It's about time you made an honest woman of me," she whispered. Jason grinned. "Why?" "Because you're going to be a daddy," she replied. Overcome with emotion, he kissed her passionately. "I love you so much," he murmured. "I love you more," she answered. "Just one favor." "What's that?" he asked, still smiling. "Please don't ask me to fly anywhere," she said with a laugh. Jason chuckled, pulling her close. "Don't worry, honey," he reassured her. "I'm done with flying for a while."
Husband unexpectedly arrived at the party, caught his wife cheating, and immediately sought revenge. I sat on a car hood by plate 128 when they exited. Her face paled, avoiding eye contact. As I got off, he raised his hands defensively as I reassured them, "You're not worth my time." Then I left in my car. The confrontation stemmed from a lengthy history. I met Jim when his family moved in next door. Both 8 years old, we were the only boys in the neighborhood, naturally becoming close like twin brothers. By 4th grade, we played sports together and had each other's backs, remaining inseparable throughout high school. I met Laura when I was in 10th grade, and we started dating. By senior year, we were still together. Jim hooked up with Annabelle Spears, and they went on double dates with Laura and me. On prom night, Laura gave me her pureness in the next room, where Jim and Annabelle were doing the same thing. After high school, Jim enlisted in the Navy while Laura and I pursued college degrees. I studied civil engineering at Eastern Michigan University, while Laura chose information technology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Despite the proximity of our campuses, maintaining our relationship proved challenging. Laura occasionally canceled our dates to see someone else, unbeknownst to me, until friends at the U of M revealed her actions. One evening, I followed Laura and a guy to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road. Spotting me, Laura withdrew from him, suggesting familiarity beyond that night. This signaled it wasn't their first encounter, revealing a pattern of behavior I was unaware of. I had no clue what they were discussing, but Laura seemed uneasy, stealing glances at me while I pretended indifference. After finishing my meal, I left without acknowledging her and drove home. The next day, Friday, our planned date came and went without me showing up or even calling to cancel. Instead, I immersed myself in a book, disconnecting from everything. Saturday, I enjoyed a party at the Delta Phi house and met Robin, who left a lasting impression. Sunday, while engrossed in my studies, the doorbell interrupted me. Peering through my telescope, I saw Laura standing outside. I opened the door, and she squeezed past me, entering the room. Turning to me, she asked, "Where were you Friday night? Why didn't you answer the phone?" Closing the door, I faced her and inquired, "Which question do you want me to tackle first?" "What?" she responded. There were 3 questions. Which one should I answer first? Don't sugarcoat it, Rob. What's up? She pressed. All right, I'll answer them in my preferred order then. First, where I've been. Mostly here, though I did hit up a frat party Saturday night. Next, why I didn't pick up the phone. Simple, I didn't hear it because you didn't call. Yeah, my bad for unplugging it. Now, where were you Friday night? Right here, ordered pizza and dove into a great book. Why didn't you give me a heads up that you weren't coming? She demanded. I figured you were busy with your boyfriend. I assumed boyfriend? What are you on about, Rob? You're my boyfriend. Huh. Then who were you cozying up to at the restaurant on Thursday? She questioned. Just a friend. We weren't in love. You were sitting close, leaning on him, and he had his arm around you. That's not lovey-dovey? Then what is it? It's meaningless, Rob. We're just friends. If you don't see any problem, Laura, why didn't you come over and say hi or invite me to join you? Introduce me to your friend. Have a chat with me before heading off on a date. Maybe you hesitated because then he'd question who I was, and you didn't want to explain. Why didn't you approach me if it bothered you? Because I wanted to observe your behavior, see how you act. Why would you want to do that? Because I've heard too much about your dating life when I'm not around. Heard you've been out with guys on nights we had plans, so yeah, I wanted to see how you interacted with another guy. You don't control me, Rob. Nowhere does it say we're exclusive. I thought we did, Laura. I recall giving you my ring and letter sweater to show we were committed. A sweater and a ring? Seriously, Rob, that's so juvenile. Maybe, but it happened in high school. And when we graduated, you didn't return them and say, school's over, so we're done. But if you feel it doesn't bind you, I can see it the same way. I met a nice girl at the party and she gave me her number, so I guess I can call her now. Laura's expression turned sour and she spat, "Go ahead, I don't care," before storming off. Watching her leave, I realized she didn't make excuses, promise not to repeat her actions, or reassure me of her loyalty. She had transitioned from a schoolgirl to a grown woman, and she demanded a change. It was tough given our history, but addressing her feelings now was wiser than ignoring them. Busy with homework from Monday to Wednesday, I finally reached out to Robin on Thursday. After chatting, we arranged a date for Friday night. I picked her up, we dined, and instead of a movie, she suggested attending a party she knew about. Arriving at the Belleville apartment around 8, fate played its hand. Laura and the guy she'd been with on Thursday were the first faces I saw. Oh, damn, I muttered. What's wrong? Robin inquired. Them. I gestured at Laura and the guy. Do you know them? I know her. Miss Piggy, yeah, that's her nickname. How come? She's promiscuous, earned the label Miss Piggy. Are you sure about that? What else do you call someone who's committed but still entertains other men when her partner's away? Are you certain about that? Especially regarding the rumors? Honestly, I can't confirm firsthand, but several guys claim they've had flirty encounters with her. You didn't mention how you know her. I'm the guy she was supposed to marry until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's with now. Oh boy, can we expect drama? No, we split on Sunday, so we're officially done. What are the odds I'd hear from you if Thursday hadn't happened? Slim to none. But Thursday did. And we're here to enjoy ourselves. So shall we? She took my hand and led me to meet the host. Laura, initially off to the side, looked shocked upon seeing me at the party. Whether because she didn't anticipate seeing me here or because she was caught with a new boyfriend, I'm not sure. Ignoring her, Robin introduced me to Gary and his wife, Artist, and we chatted briefly before getting drinks. The basement had become a dance floor. Robin and I danced, mingled, and had a blast. Whenever I glimpsed Laura, her expression was inscrutable. Around 11, Robin suggested we leave due to her Saturday plans. After bidding farewell to our hosts, I drove Robin home. Your ex seemed fixated on you today, she remarked. Probably caught off guard to see me there. No, I sensed she was uneasy seeing you with someone else. Tough luck, she's the reason our relationship ended. Perhaps, but I don't think she's thrilled about it. Maybe not, but she'll need to adjust. Does that mean I'll see more of you or that you'll start seeing other girls? I prefer to date one girl at a time. I enjoyed tonight and I'll ask you out again. If you're on board, you'll be the only one. What if I'm not ready for something exclusive? Then you'll decline and I'll find someone else to date. If she says no too, I'll check back with you. If you still decline, I'll continue until I find someone who's always a yes. I like your approach and I'm open to it. How about tomorrow night? Sounds good. I escorted her to the door, bid her good night, and as I turned to depart, she halted me, requesting a moment. Facing her again, she confessed, I never kiss on the first date, but I suppose there's a first time for everything, and kissed me. See you tomorrow, she called out as she headed home. Upon returning home, Dad informed me that Laura had called, expressing distress. I explained it was too late to return her call and promised to do so in the morning. As per my routine, Saturday morning, I slept in, and when I finally made it to the kitchen for coffee, Mom urged me to call Laura. She's called twice already this morning. Not until I've had my coffee. Are things okay between you two? It's more complicated now. Does she know? She should, it was her decision. Just then, the phone rang. Mom answered, saying it was for me. It's Laura. I picked up and greeted her. Yes. Why didn't you call? I got in too late last night to call and I just woke up. That's not what I meant. Why didn't you call me last night for our usual Friday date? We discussed this last Sunday, Laura. You said we weren't exclusive and agreed to see other people. I told you if you did, I would too, and you left in a hurry. That's not what I intended, Rob. You should have understood that. Don't feed me that, Laura. You were clearly with that guy I saw you with last Thursday. I wasn't with him, Rob. I went to that party alone, and he happened to be there. Sure, Laura. Believe what you want, but it doesn't change anything. I'm hearing things about you and what happened, like how you got the nickname Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but it's false. Why shouldn't I believe it after seeing you with your friend at the restaurant? And I don't buy that you coincidentally bumped into him at the party. He was too close to you and hugging you when I arrived. No, Laura. You're not committed to just me, and I'm not interested in being one of many. Please return the ring and the leather sweater. It seems they hold no significance to you, unlike in high school. I'll catch you later. Goodbye. That seems pretty conclusive, my mom remarked. She decided that being exclusive with me wasn't enough, and as I just said, I'm not interested in being one of many. During all this, I found solace in Robin's company. Jim's letters arrived every couple of weeks, updating me on his life. He graduated from boot camp and entered specialized training, joining a Navy construction battalion, also known as the Navy Seabees. He mastered both building and demolition. He never inquired about Annabelle, so in my responses, I omitted her too. I knew he wouldn't want to hear about her. Within a week of his deployment, Annabelle was already pursuing someone she met at a party. A month later, she moved in with a coworker. 3 months after that, another move, she started cohabiting with a man she met when he towed her car to the store. Rumors circulated that he made her entertain his friends at his apartment. Then, Annabelle vanished without a trace until I received a letter from Jim. He had completed his training and was stationed permanently in Norfolk. Upon his arrival, he summoned Annabelle to join him. I wish you could be my best man, but we had little time to prepare. The sooner we wed, the sooner we can secure housing on base. Poor guy. I feared the moment you left she'd have another man before the door's echo faded. I wasn't lacking money, thanks to my grandparents, who had set up a college fund for me since birth. It had enough to cover tuition and rent for an off-campus apartment if I chose so. At the start of junior year, Robin and I moved in together, giving me a taste of family life, which I adored. After about 6 months, I began considering making our arrangement permanent. I still harbored doubts that what Robin and I shared was too perfect to be true. Yet she showed no signs of wavering in our relationship until the day I mentioned searching for an engagement ring. That's when she revealed her plan. To return to California after graduation to marry her childhood sweetheart, now studying in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. They both acknowledged each other's situations, including his relationship with an English woman. We recognized that abstaining from physical closeness for several years wasn't realistic for two healthy young adults. Hence, we agreed to an open relationship. It shouldn't immediately impact us, Rob, she assured. However, it did, especially me. Essentially, I felt yanked from what I thought was a romantic partnership into more of a friendship. The issue was I didn't find satisfaction in casual flings. I craved more than just physical connection. As a result, Robin and I gradually grew apart. Nearly 4 months to the day after Robin dashed my romantic hopes, she remarked, "You don't seem content here, do you?" I admitted feeling uneasy and explained why. "I'm sorry, darling. Sometimes I wish I didn't love Alex so much so I could fulfill your desires more. If it weren't for him, you'd be my partner." "Thanks, I suppose. So what's the plan? Shall we flip a coin to decide who stays and who goes?" "No need." I anticipated this moment. Mom hasn't rented out my room yet. She decided to keep it for me, at least until I'm 40 or until she has grandchildren. "So you're staying and I'm leaving." "Friends always." After a hug, she requested, "Last night, please." I'd been back home for a week. On Friday evening, while working on an article in my room, Mom called from downstairs. "Rob, someone's here to see you." Descending, I found Laura conversing with Mom. Mom nodded at me, saying, "I'll leave you two alone," and retreated to the kitchen. "Hi, Rob." "Hi, Laura, how are you?" "Okay, I guess, hoping things will improve." Oh, Robin called, mentioned you're back on the market, and hinted I should hurry if I want to be first in line. Why I for the first spot? Why I for it all? There wouldn't be a line if I hadn't acted foolishly. In fact, Robin wouldn't even exist. I'm not vying for a spot, Rob. I just want to return to where I belong. Where's that? She lifted her left hand, revealing, I never returned your ring. My class ring adorned her left ring finger. There's a party at Alice Johnson's tonight. Want to go with me? She dangled the idea, adding, just so everyone's clear, I've staked my claim. I've got you back, and I'm broadcasting it. The real surprise came post-party. She remained quiet as I drove her home, gazing out the passenger window. When we reached her house, I suggested apartment hunting on Saturday. Renting an apartment is more economical than constant motel stays. Are you asking if I want to move in with you? It's crossed my mind. What time? Around 9. Great, you've got yourself a date. Laura and I settled into a 2-bedroom apartment situated roughly midway between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We converted the second bedroom into an office, housing Laura's computer desk alongside mine. Around a month post-move, Jim returned home on a 30-day leave, spending ample time with Laura and me. Seeing Jim and Annabelle together, they seemed to gel well, making me question my earlier suspicions about her. However, 3 weeks after Jim returned to duty, Annabelle showed up. With Jim deployed to Iraq, Annabelle opted not to wait for his return to base. She vanished for 2 weeks, staying with her current partner. Upon her visit to Jim in Norfolk 3 weeks later, rumors resurfaced about her liaison with a former flame, including alleged revelries and hosting group encounters. I contemplated confronting her, but Laura dissuaded me, asserting it was none of our concern. Besides, as far as we knew, Jim and Annabelle had an open relationship, a not uncommon arrangement during prolonged military separations. Laura doubted Jim would consent to such an agreement, but advising him of Annabelle's behavior might backfire. Instead, she suggested I let it be. Jim returned from Afghanistan just in time to serve as my best man at my wedding to Laura. Afterwards, he and Annabelle relocated to Norfolk, where he completed the last 9 months of his military service. Upon discharge, they returned home, and Jim secured a job with a construction company as a heavy equipment operator. Over the next 2 years, the Marshalls, Jim and Annabelle, became regular guests in our home, visiting us at least once every fortnight. There were no signs of trouble between Jim and Annabelle, and there was no indication of infidelity on her part. Laura's theory seemed plausible, especially when the company Jim worked for won a contract to lay a pipeline in Alaska. Given the harsh conditions at the construction site, Jim opted to leave Annabelle at home for the 4-month duration of his assignment. However, barely a week later, Annabelle was spotted in a motel room with Gary Mellows, the owner of Jim's company. Subsequently, Gary's car was frequently seen parked in Jim's driveway almost every night of the week. Complications arose with the Alaska project, extending Jim's absence by another 2 months. Coincidentally, Laura and Annabelle shared the same doctor, and Laura happened to be at the doctor's office the day Annabelle received distressing news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, and Jim had been away for over 3 months. Laura learned about Annabelle's pregnancy from 2 nurses who had attended school with us. Aware of Laura's connection to Annabelle, they inquired how she thought Jim would react to the news. In the realm of gossip among friends, patient confidentiality sometimes takes a back seat. Laura speculated briefly before suggesting Jim may never learn the truth of my suspicions. Annabelle will likely opt for infanticide, resolving the situation before Jim returns. However, events unfolded differently. Someone whom Laura wouldn't dissuade informed Jim of the situation. Upon his return, Jim rented a car and discreetly parked nearby until he witnessed Mellows arriving at his house and entering with Annabelle. After waiting 15 minutes, allowing them time to engage, Jim entered the house with a digital camera, capturing evidence of their affair. Subsequently, an ambulance responded to an emergency call, and Mellows was hospitalized. When the police arrived, they initially intended to detain Jim until he presented the photographic evidence. Jim had used a Canon Rebel camera set to continuous mode, which captured Mellows lunging at him in the series of images. He might have simply aimed to retrieve the camera from Jim's possession, but based on the sequence of photos, it was evident to Jim that he was under attack and merely defending himself. The police accepted this explanation and departed. 20 minutes later, Annabelle emerged onto the porch with a single suitcase, locking the door behind her. The divorce proceeded smoothly, as did the lawsuit filed against Mellows for causing alienation of affection. Additionally, Jim filed a molestation suit against Mellows, alleging that Mellows had hired him only to send him out of town and then move in with his wife. Mellows had the option to settle out of court, avoiding public attention, but he chose to contest the case, resulting in his actions with the employee's wife becoming public knowledge. Following an extended absence from town, the jury ruled in Jim's favor, awarding him $1.3 million. After settling legal fees and taxes, he retained slightly over $750,000. He used this to pay off the house, install an in-ground pool, and purchase a new Ford F-350. Once the divorce was finalized, Annabelle vanished from view, rumored to have relocated out of town. To resolve the lawsuit, Mellows had to sell off some assets and property. Additionally, he suffered a loss of business as some customers and potential buyers deemed him untrustworthy due to his actions towards his employees' spouse. Jim still had some funds remaining and proposed to me the idea of starting my own company and taking over the business that Mellows had forfeited. I would handle the design while Jim would manage construction. After careful consideration with Laura, we decided to proceed, leading to the establishment of R&J Constructors. As partners, we've managed to thrive. Not only did we attract many clients who had left Mellows, but we also outperformed him on several projects. With human nature being what it is, Jim ensured everyone was aware whenever we outperformed Mellows. The subsequent 5 years passed swiftly. While Jim explored various relationships, he never found someone he wanted to commit to long-term. He spent considerable time with Laura and me, typically joining us once a week with his girlfriend. Things were going exceedingly well. Laura had ascended the corporate ladder, achieving the position of regional manager and emerging as a frontrunner for the vice president role. I believe things couldn't improve further, and unfortunately, I was correct. On a Tuesday, as I wrapped up a lunch meeting with a prospective client, Gary Mellows approached and asked if he could buy me a drink. Personally, I held no ill will towards Gary. I reasoned that if someone like Annabelle, whom I considered less than reputable, offered solace to a lonely individual like Gary, it wasn't fair to fault him for accepting. I never bought into the narrative about Gary orchestrating Jim's departure for Annabelle's sake. Knowing Annabelle's character, I speculated she might have visited Gary's office to collect Jim's paycheck and expressed her loneliness due to his absence. In any case, Gary's issues were tied to Jim, not me, so I accepted his offer for a drink. Once he settled in, he inquired, "How's everything going?" "Could be better," I replied. "Perhaps you'll contemplate selling," he proposed. "Selling? Why on earth would I do that?" I retorted. "To make your pal Jim my business partner," he suggested. "Are you out of your mind?" I exclaimed. "Not really. Take a look at this," he said, opening his briefcase and presenting a folder to me. I accepted it, opened it, and was taken aback. The folder contained a photo of Laura and Jim holding hands as they entered a motel room. Several more images depicted them entering or exiting the motel room, along with a handful showing them embracing and kissing in various locations. I glanced up at Gary, who explained, "Apologies. I was tailing him to gather evidence for revenge. When the private investigator handed me those photos, I didn't know she was your spouse. I only discerned from the rings in the picture that she belonged to someone else, so I hired a PI to uncover her identity to prepare for my retaliation." "Why you were involved?" I pointed out. "You followed his orders?" Gary countered, "No, I didn't." I refuted. "Yes, I had a fling with his wife, but I never orchestrated his departure to pursue her." She entered my office, shut the door, and began undressing. Meeting her gaze, she declared, "Since you sent Jim away, you'll have to look after me until he returns." Being unattached, I had to decline Annabelle. To me, this entire debacle is Jim's responsibility. Initially, everyone's aware of Annabelle's promiscuity, a trait she's carried since high school. Jim should have been aware, but he didn't act on it. "No, Rob, he hit me hard with that lawsuit, and I intend to retaliate. I'm just sorry you're caught in the middle." Any idea how long this has been going on? According to the private investigator's findings, it's been at least a year, possibly longer. How could it have gone unnoticed for so long? If she never raised suspicions, how could you uncover it? So why the interest in buying me out? What's the benefit of becoming Jim's partner? Consider it equal partnership. I'll have an equal say. If he proposes plan A, I'll advocate for plan B. No matter his preference, I'll oppose it. Plus, I'll oversee pricing and ensure our rates undercut the competition. I'll drive the company into bankruptcy, and Jim will suffer the consequences. But you will too. Not entirely. I've done my due diligence. If the business collapses, we'll liquidate assets, and I'll recoup most of my investment. I won't profit, unless you count earnings from my other ventures undercutting Jim's bids. But I won't endure substantial losses either. What if he resorts to molestation until you sell your share? Last time, he caught me with his wife, and I prioritized seizing the camera over self-defense. If he tries again, it won't be as easy for him. In fact, I'm confident I can handle him if necessary. So, are you interested? Possibly, but I want to conduct my own investigation first. If I decide to proceed, do you have a ballpark figure in mind? I proposed a sum and he deemed it feasible, advising me to contact him if I opt to move forward. I departed the meeting with Mellows feeling utterly shaken. How could Laura and Jim have carried on like this for nearly a year without me suspecting a thing? I had observed no signs of discontent from Laura, no decline in affection. Our life appeared unchanged, at least from my perspective. What had gone awry? While I trusted Detective Gary's findings and evidence, I couldn't dismiss the possibility of tampered photos and Gary's personal motives. I needed certainty before taking action. Returning to the office, I reached out to a friend at an insurance agency for recommendations on investigative services. Armed with this, I arranged a meeting, and 13 days later I felt assured. On purported work trips, Jim rendezvoused with Laura at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. How she managed time off from work for these liaisons eluded me. Now I had to determine my course of action. Though my desired path was clear, I just needed to devise a strategy. After 2 hours with a lawyer, I had a clear understanding of my options and obligations. With no fault grounds, assets would be divided evenly. Concerned about Laura's share of proceeds from selling my stake in the company, I realized deception might be necessary. Even so, she'd still receive some of the proceeds. I struck a deal with Mellows to officially sell him my stake in the company for 1/3 of its actual value. 1/3 of the payment went into a bank account solely in my name, while the remaining 2/3 were deposited into an offshore account I'd arranged. The agreement stipulated that Mellows wouldn't appear at the office or occupy my desk until the morning I handed Laura and Jim the necessary documents. Laura filed for divorce, citing infidelity, while Jim pursued a case for alienation of affection. Despite residing in a no-fault state, I could still pursue legal action for infidelity, potentially resulting in a slightly more favorable division of assets, though not a 50-50th split. To substantiate the claim of infidelity, evidence was crucial. Examination of reports from both Gary's private investigator and mine revealed consistent rendezvous at the same motel, always on Wednesdays. My detective secured a room for surveillance, incentivizing the porter to ensure Laura and Jim were assigned to that specific room. On Wednesday morning, I instructed Maria, our receptionist, to inform Jim that I'd be absent due to a dentist appointment and to mention the possibility of my continued absence in the afternoon if I didn't feel well after the procedure. After the effects of the gas wore off, I exited the house and returned after Laura had left for work. The locksmith arrived promptly at 9 to change all the locks. Once he finished, I headed to the bank and emptied out both the accounts and the safe. My lawyer advised taking only half, but my mood was unwaveringly resolute. Screw you, Laura. I had no intention of making things easy for her. She'd have to fight for her share. Eventually, I also withdrew the funds I expected from the business. If it proved excessive, Jim could contest it in court, but until then, it was mine. My detective phoned at 12:10 to report that the couple had checked into room 128. I drove over, had a brief chat with the detective, then stationed myself on the hood of a nearby car waiting for them to emerge. After a tense encounter, I drove away. Just as I was leaving, a man approached them and handed over the papers. Alongside the divorce papers, Laura received a temporary restraining order mandating her to stay 500 feet away from me and the house. Securing it required a bit of trickery. I had to fabricate a story, claiming a third party had tipped me off about Jim and Laura discussing my insurance coverage and business shares value. A hearing was pending to decide if the restraining order would become permanent, but it might take a few weeks. It was just another tactic to unsettle Laura. The crucial point was that she couldn't enter the house without court supervision, and I had no intention of making myself available to make keys for the new locks. Along with Jim's papers for the foreclosure attachment suit was a brief note. "You're familiar with how these suits go, aren't you? How does it feel to be on the receiving end?" Driving away from the motel, I called Gary on his cell phone. "Everything's arranged. Have a good first day at the office tomorrow." I drove to the airport, parked in the long-term lot, stashed my cell phone in the glove compartment, and boarded the flight to Cabo San Lucas. After a week of scuba diving and beach lounging, I returned home. Upon switching on my phone, I found it inundated with voicemails. Most were from Laura, as expected, but there were also 4 from Jim. You'd think he'd be the last person eager to talk to me. Nevertheless, I had no interest in conversing with either of them. Would I desire an explanation? Naturally, I'd want to understand why. Yet I had resolved to leave them in the past and focus on moving forward. Their reasons for betrayal were not something I wished to dwell on. My attorney was aware of my week-long absence, so I decided to inform him of my return. He suggested I contact Laura, who had been trying to reach me twice daily to access the house and retrieve my belongings under court supervision. I was about to instruct him to make arrangements with the court to allow her entry when a different idea dawned on me, a chance to further unsettle her. I phoned her and inquired about her needs. I need my clothes and other items, but I can't enter the house even with court supervision because I lack a key and they won't let me break in, she explained. You have nothing there to take, I countered. I donated everything to Goodwill. I don't want any reminders of your deceitful behavior. There's nothing of yours left, not even a stray hair clip. She retorted, You had no right to do that. I had every right, just as you had the right to betray me. We need to talk, I responded. It's not what you think, she pleaded. Be honest, Laura. I know you weren't happy with Jim. I'm sure of it. Goodbye, Laura. I ended the call. Although Laura's belongings remained in the house, I was intentionally delaying her retrieval. It was my way of unsettling her, ensuring she wouldn't get her things back anytime soon. I've always had a good rapport with Maria, our multitasking receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, cook, and cleaner, so I phoned her to check in. Not too bad for me, but things aren't going well for the company. There's constant bickering between Gary and Jim over trivial matters. Jim gives orders, and Gary refuses to comply. Orders get placed and canceled in quick succession. Work sits idle while they sort out their disputes. I was fed up, so I handed in my resignation last Friday. But Gary offered to double my salary if I stayed, so I decided against leaving. They even got into a physical altercation last Thursday, but there was no clear winner, although Jim ended up with a broken nose. Why did you leave us? Why side with Gary? I shared the entire saga with her. She fell silent for a moment before responding, Now I have another reason to stick around. And what's that? I can assist Gary. I never cared for Jim. He persistently flirted with me despite knowing I was engaged. Once he even insinuated that he'd let me go if I agreed to a date with him. We both know what he meant by date. When I questioned what you would think of him letting me go, he fell silent. You should have informed me. Why? It was a personal issue, and I handled it. I sympathize with you and Laura, Rob, but there might be a positive aspect to it, at least for me. Or how's that? It means you're available again. How do you feel about being pursued? Weren't you engaged? I was. Until I caught that idiot doing to me what he did to you. When did it happen? About 3 weeks ago. Well, honey, if you're interested, I'll consider you first when I start dating again, but that won't happen for a while. I won't give Laura any ammunition. I can wait, but keep me in mind if you ever feel lonely and want company for dinner. I will, sweetie, and thank you. My phone rang 16 times that day, 14 calls from Laura and 2 from Jim. I couldn't imagine anything that guy could say that I'd want to hear. If he was calling to ask for something, it definitely wasn't from me. I deleted all the calls and went home, made myself dinner, then on a whim, I called Gary Mellows to check on his scheme. Not bad at all. I made sure to be at your desk when he arrived at work. He saw me, frowned, and demanded to know why I was in the office and sitting at your desk. I chuckled and informed him that I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could practically see the steam coming out of his ears as he perused a copy of our agreement. I got us off to a proper start. Almost immediately, he called for a fuel truck because the front-end loader and other equipment at Wilkins's site had run out of diesel fuel. Once he left the office, I phoned and canceled the order. One of the loaders ran out of fuel, and Jim called Allied and gave them an earful. They informed him that I canceled the order and that they wouldn't tolerate such behavior from him, suggesting he find fuel elsewhere. That's when he approached me, demanding to know what I was doing. I explained that Allied was overcharging us, and I was seeking a better price, and things went downhill from there. A little birdie told me you two ended up in a fistfight. Indeed. It all concluded last Thursday. And the outcome? I may have been a tad optimistic when I mentioned I thought I could take him, but I got past it and gave him a good punching. Well, carry on, and best of luck with your plan. After hanging up, I headed to the room I'd turned into an office, fired up my computer, and began drafting my resume. I planned to kickstart my job hunt the following day. As I typed away on the keyboard, the doorbell chimed. Opening the door, I found Jim standing there. What the hell do you want? We need to talk, Rob. No, you don't, creep. It's not my fault, Rob. She came on to me. She caught me in a bad mood because of what Annabelle did to me. I wasn't thinking straight, Rob. I'm sorry, Rob, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't pursue her. But you knew she was my wife. You knew how you felt when you found out about Annabelle, and you didn't even stop to think you'd make me feel the same way, did you? You had to know I'd find out sooner or later, probably the same way you found out about Annabelle, someone told you. Well, creep, somebody told me. You're a scoundrel, as far as I'm concerned. You're supposed to be my friend. And even if I believe Laura made a move on you, which I don't, you should have turned her down. Just like I turned Annabelle away when she made advances on me. You knew you were better than that, but you went ahead anyway. And even if she initiated it and caught you off guard, that doesn't excuse the second, third, fourth, and however many times after that. No, you stabbed me in the back, plain and simple. Why did you load me up with mellows? Because in the mood I was in when I found out and the rage I felt, if I'd come after you, things might have ended differently. But you're not worth going to jail over. Besides, involving mellows will bring you grief that will last far longer than any consequences from a physical altercation. But you know what? The rage I felt at the time is gone. And that's when I punched him. I grabbed his shirt, pulled him into the house, slammed the door shut, and unleashed my anger on him. He was unconscious when I dragged him out and put him in the car. You wouldn't believe the grin on my face when I got back inside. I might have the police showing up, but I wasn't concerned. I could simply say he attacked me, and I acted in self-defense. I'll refer to his altercation with Mellows and claim he's upset because I sold my share of the business to Mellows, and he's trying to retaliate. The next day, I sent out 14 resumes and checked in with my attorney. He mentioned a hearing on the temporary restraining order set for the following Monday, but hadn't heard from Laura or her lawyer. Contemplating contacting Laura, I decided against it. Delaying her hiring a lawyer meant delaying any communication between us. Throughout the week, I received responses to my resumes and traveled for interviews in Atlanta on Wednesday and Baltimore on Thursday. Though I enjoyed both interviews, I also heard back from a San Diego company, sparking my interest in warmer climates. I scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. Monday arrived with the restraining order hearing. Surprisingly, the judge found no grounds to uphold it, ordering me to grant Laura access to the house. Laura attended with her lawyer, attempting to speak with me. I stepped aside, sought my lawyer's assistance, and returned to her side. "You wait until my attorney arrives before speaking to me," I insisted. "I just wanted to inform you I'll be coming tonight," she replied. "No, you won't. I have a job interview at 2:30 and won't return until Wednesday. You can visit after 6. Her lawyer began to speak, but I interjected. "She will not step foot in this house without supervision. A court representative will oversee everything, and you're welcome to have your attorney present too." "No, that's not satisfactory. They won't understand what she's taking. If she grabs something inappropriate, I'll have to fight to retrieve it." "She was away for 2 weeks, and another 48 hours won't injure her," I stated. Firmly. Her lawyer sighed. "Then let's await the judge's decision." As he turned to leave, Laura intervened. "Forget it. I can wait." I nodded and said, "Wednesday at 6, before departing." "Wait a moment, Rob. Can we have a conversation?" "No," I replied, exiting the building. Satisfied with my interview in San Diego, I returned home, eagerly anticipating news from them. At 6, Laura arrived, accompanied by a representative from her lawyer's office. The court-appointed woman arrived at 2:06, and during those 20 minutes we conversed over coffee. She explained her role as an observer for the court, tasked with inventorying seized items and noting disputed ones. I assured her there was no need for a list of disputed items. She could take whatever she wanted. "If that's your stance, why did you take a firm position against her? She betrayed me, and she did it with someone who had been my best friend for over 25 years. I couldn't retaliate physically without facing legal consequences, but I had to do something to retaliate and inflict some pain on her. It wasn't much, but it was something." As the doorbell rang, I ushered Laura and her accompanying man from the lawyer's office inside, then stepped outside to mow the lawn. When I returned indoors, everyone had left except Laura, who sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. She glanced up as I entered. "You deceived me. You didn't donate any of my belongings to Goodwill." "Perhaps not, but I relish seeing your reaction when you claimed I had no right to do so. I hadn't anticipated everything ending up belonging to her. It'll take me longer to sort it out than I thought." I retrieved my key ring from my pocket, took out my house key, and extended it across the table to her. "No need to move. You can collect the keys on Friday." "Friday? I'll have vacated the premises by then." "Why?" "I'm interviewing and I'm relocating as soon as I secure a job." "I mean, why take those actions if you intended to give me the house and leave? What's with the restraining order and the falsehoods about disposing of my belongings?" "That's a naive question. After what you put me through, I had to retaliate somehow. Just be grateful I opted for a peaceful resolution rather than a violent one. Just because I refrained from attacking you doesn't absolve you, but it's the best recourse I had without facing legal repercussions. I remember you declined when I asked if we could talk tonight, but I'm still going to make an attempt to persuade you that divorce isn't necessary. Let's be realistic, Laura. After what you've done, there's absolutely no way we can salvage our marriage. But that doesn't change my feelings for you, Rob. I love you, and you know it. What happened with Jim was a mistake, just a foolish mistake. I've always liked Jim, but my feelings for him don't compare to the love I have for you. Your feelings for Jim don't matter. The fact remains you had a good time with him, regardless of whether you loved him. It still constitutes infidelity, and you shouldn't doubt how I feel about that. Just remember how devastated I was when I found out about Annabelle and Jim. I was so upset that I considered telling him, but you convinced me otherwise. That should have made it clear how I would feel if you did the same to me. And don't give me excuses like you didn't want me to find out. Cheaters always get caught, always. Jim discovered the truth about Annabelle because someone witnessed them together and informed him. It's the same way I found out about you and Jim going into that motel room. Doesn't my love for you matter? No, Laura, it doesn't, because it wasn't enough to prevent you from betraying me. But Rob, it didn't mean anything. Truly, it was insignificant. It was an unforeseen circumstance, an accident. How could having relations with my former best friend be classified as an accident? He visited our home while you were in Santa Fe. He was distraught about Annabelle. Even after cutting her out of his life, he still longed for her. We had a drink, and as he began to cry, I embraced him, trying to console him. I recall thinking, this is so wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. Yet it felt oddly comforting. I must admit, it felt strangely exhilarating. The next time you were out of town, Jim came by, and we both understood his intentions, and we resumed our liaison. There was no love involved, Rob. As cliché as it sounds, it was purely physical, just a fleeting thrill in my life. Throughout it all, I never neglected you. I love you sincerely, Rob, and you know it. We can overcome this. Divorce isn't necessary. Love has no bearing on this, Laura. I need a divorce. I can't coexist with someone who has betrayed me. It's straightforward, Laura. You betrayed my trust. If I stayed, I'd be vigilantly monitoring you, anticipating another transgression. By your own admission, you continued because you found pleasure in the deceit. You can make all the promises you want about not repeating it, but your assurances hold no weight. You pledged to forsake all others when we wed, and you broke that vow. I find it hard to trust anything you say, Laura. Jim's version of events completely contradicts yours. According to him, it wasn't an accident. He says you were actively playing a game with him. Either he's lying or you are. The issue is that after what both of you did, neither of you is trustworthy to me, so I can't favor one story over the other. The bottom line, Laura, is that we've broken up as a couple. I'm not giving up, Rob. I'm going to fight for the divorce. I know we can get through this because we love each other. You're mad at me right now, and I get that. But I can make a promise to you and keep it, especially now that I understand what breaking that promise could cost me. My lawyer says he can get the court to order counseling, and I know that can help. I love you, Rob, and I'm not letting you go. You don't seem to understand that I don't want you right now. Okay, I'll admit that I still love you, and it'll take me a while to get over it, but there's no way I can live with you again. Every time I go to bed with you, I'll think about you being with that idiot who was my best friend, and I can't live like that. You won't fight for a divorce from Laura, because if you do, I will release the videotape of your last meeting with Jim. Every family member, every friend, and all your CO workers will get a copy. I will create your own adult site for you, and there are dozens of amateur adult sites where I can post it. And I will do it with your full name and address. It'll make your life very interesting. Crap, Rob. No such video exists. Oh no, wait here. I went to the den where I had my briefcase, pulled out a copy of the disc, went back to the kitchen and handed it to her. Take a look at it. After you watch it, decide if you want someone else to watch it. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I need to do. You can pick up the house on Friday, but for now, you have to go. On Thursday and Friday, I moved out of the house and put most of my stuff in storage. Then I rented a room at the executive suites for a month, hoping to have a job by the end of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit for interviews, all of which I felt good about, but I didn't hear back from any of them. I sat down at my desk, calculated my finances, and realized I could live without a job for about 6 years. I started looking into other cities and states with a lower cost of living, hoping to stretch those 6 years to 8, maybe 10. Laura signed the divorce papers and returned them to my attorney. I almost regretted that she did that. I would have loved to scatter a CD of her and Jim all over the house, but a deal is a deal. We agreed on a 50/50 division of the property, with each party paying their own attorney fees. Since I filed the suit, I paid the legal fees. Laura wanted the house, and my half of the equity was slightly more than what I had borrowed from the bank, so that worked out. True, I had to give Laura half of what I got from selling my half of the company, but I had planned for that. She claimed I sold out too cheaply, but it didn't matter because the other 2/3 of what I got from the sale was safely tucked away. I heard some interesting gossip. Apparently, as soon as I was out of the picture, Jim started intimidating Laura so relentlessly that she had to get a restraining order against him. Not that I cared, of course, but it amused me. I decided to wait until the divorce was finalized before taking any action. Eventually, I began receiving calls from some of the companies where I had interviewed. A company in San Diego called, asking me to return for another interview. However, before I could call to arrange it, Gary contacted me. "How would you like your company back?" "Why would I want my company back?" "I sold it to you so I could go back to Jay and leave him behind. Why would I want to become his partner again?" "You wouldn't want to, but you don't have to." After our last argument, I said, "If you're so unhappy with me as a partner, I'll either buy you out or sell your half to someone else." He thought for about 30 seconds and then asked how much I'd pay for his half. He accepted half of what I gave you. The question remains, why should I want the company back? If you've done even half of what you said you would to sabotage Jim, the company might not be worth much now. You could be surprised. Come to the office and let's talk. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I went to see him. When I walked in, Maria jumped up from her desk and hugged me, then poked her head into Gary's office to tell him I had arrived. "As you know, I only bought you out to mess with Marshall. I didn't really need him, but things are changing. I'm getting more into the construction side of the business. I want to move away from the engineering part." On one hand, I couldn't get the engineers I wanted, so I started considering alternatives. The solution that came to mind was to call you and ask you to set up a company that I would contract with for the engineering work. But then Marshall sold me the company, and I thought, why not just sell it to you and contract with you? I can't afford to buy out both my half and Jim's half. You won't have to pay much because the company isn't worth much anymore. Since I own everything, I've transferred all the construction work and equipment to my other company. What's left is purely the engineering part. I'll sell you the company for what I paid Jim and sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with about 15 other firms. I don't see how you can lose. "How much did you give Jim?" he told me, and it was less than I had in my offshore account. "But there is one condition." "And what's that?" I asked. I have no secrets from Maria, and I shared the idea with her. She said that if you agree, she will stay with you and not move to my company. If you accept the deal, you will keep her on your team. I didn't have to think long, and I told him that I would agree to the deal, but I wouldn't do it until my divorce was finalized, which would be in about 3 weeks at the earliest. Gary said that was fine with him, and we agreed to the deal. As I was leaving the office, Maria said, "I heard. Don't forget that at the end of those 3 weeks, you promised I would be first on the list." "I didn't think you were serious about that." "You can rest assured I am," she said with a 1,000-watt smile. As I pulled away from the curb, my cell phone rang, and it was my lawyer. Jim had learned his lesson from what happened to Gary when Gary sued Jim and called my lawyer with an offer to settle the case. I told the lawyer to accept it. I made it the rest of the way to my room at the executive suites with a huge smile on my face. In 3 weeks, I could start a new life with a new job, a new girlfriend, and money in the bank. I could spend those 3 weeks looking for a place to live and shopping for furniture. Who says nice guys always finish last?
Sophie Laurent stood by the window of her art gallery in Paris, sipping a glass of red wine as she watched the busy streets below. The clink of glasses and quiet murmur of conversations in the background made her feel like a spectator in her own life. At 32, she had achieved everything she'd once dreamt of. Her gallery, La Vie en Couleur, had become a renowned place for contemporary art, attracting critics and buyers from across Europe. But success had a hollow ring to it when she thought about the other part of her life, her marriage. 6 years had passed since she married Marcus Hartmann, a German architect with sharp features and a mind always buzzing with ideas. She could remember their wedding day as if it were yesterday. How handsome he looked in his tailored suit, the way his smile had lit up her world. Back then, they had everything, a passionate romance that transcended the physical and delved into their shared dreams of traveling the world, creating art, and leaving a mark. Yet, as time passed, things began to change. Marcus had thrown himself into his career. His architectural firm in Berlin had taken off, and though they lived apart, Sophie had hoped their love would remain strong. The distance, however, had done more than just create physical space between them. Their conversations had dwindled from intimate late-night calls to routine check-ins, dominated by discussions of work and logistics. Sophie hadn't seen Marcus in nearly 2 months. His last trip to Paris had been brief, and even then he seemed distracted, more interested in his projects than in her. The gallery, which had once been a source of pride for both of them, now felt like a lonely fortress Sophie had to manage on her own. That night, as she stared out of the window, she couldn't help but wonder if she was becoming invisible to her husband. He had once been captivated by her beauty, by her love for art, and by the way she lived life with so much passion. Now he barely seemed to notice her at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind her. She turned to see her assistant, Elodie, standing there with a polite smile. "Madame Laurent, the guests are arriving for the exhibition. Shall I show them in?" Elodie asked in her soft French accent. "Yes, of course," Sophie said, placing her wine glass on the table. "Thank you, Elodie." As the guests began to filter into the gallery, Sophie put on her professional mask, greeting each one with a warm smile. She moved through the crowd, discussing the latest pieces on display, but her mind kept drifting back to Marcus. What was he doing right now? Was he thinking of her at all? It was during one of these drifting moments that she noticed a man standing by one of the paintings, his gaze fixed on the canvas, as if he were lost in thought. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed in a tailored suit that gave him an air of sophistication. There was something about the way he looked at the painting that intrigued Sophie. She walked over to him, her curiosity piqued. "Do you like it?" she asked, her voice smooth and professional. The man turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a spark of recognition. "Very much," he said in a low melodic voice. "The use of color is captivating. It feels alive, as if the artist captured a moment of raw emotion." Sophie smiled. "That's exactly what I love about it too. The artist, Isabelle Moreau, has a way of making you feel something with every brush stroke." "I'm Luca Moretti," the man said, extending his hand. "Art critic and enthusiast." Sophie shook his hand, her smile widening. "Sophie Laurent, I own the gallery." "Ah, so you're the one responsible for bringing such remarkable works to Paris. I must say, I'm impressed," Luca said, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. Sophie felt a flutter in her chest. It wasn't often that someone made her feel seen, truly seen. And Luca was doing just that. They continued to talk, their conversation flowing effortlessly from art to travel to their shared love of culture. Luca was charming, witty, and attentive in a way that Marcus hadn't been in years. He listened to her, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself laughing more than she had in months. She was captivated by Luca's stories of his travels through Italy, his passion for art, and the way he saw the world. He had a certain vibrancy about him that was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt alive. When the exhibition finally ended, and the guests began to leave, Luca lingered. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sophie," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I hope we can continue our conversation another time." Sophie hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts of Marcus. But the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "I'd like that," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. As Luca left the gallery, Sophie stood by the door, watching him disappear into the night. There was a part of her that knew this was dangerous, that this was the beginning of something she couldn't control. But another part of her, the part that had been starved of affection and passion for so long, was desperate for more. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself thinking about Luca more often than she should. Their casual meetings at art exhibitions and gallery events had become a regular occurrence, and each time they met, the connection between them grew stronger. Luca had a way of making Sophie feel like the most important person in the room. He listened to her in a way that Marcus never did, and he had a passion for life that reignited something within her. She found herself drawn to him, not just because of his charm, but because he made her feel alive in a way that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't long before their meetings turned into something more. One evening, after a particularly successful exhibition, Luca invited Sophie to join him for dinner at a quiet, candle-lit restaurant on the banks of the Seine. The atmosphere was romantic, and the conversation flowed as easily as the wine. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself opening up to Luca in ways she hadn't with anyone before. She told him about her marriage, about how distant Marcus had become, and about the loneliness she felt in her life. Luca listened, his gaze never leaving hers, and for the first time in years, Sophie felt truly understood. "I don't know how it happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But somewhere along the way, Marcus and I lost each other. I don't even know if we can find our way back." Luca reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie. You deserve to be with someone who sees you, who appreciates you for who you are." Sophie felt a lump form in her throat. But what if it's too late? What if we've drifted too far apart? Luca's grip on her hand tightened. "It's never too late to find happiness, Sophie. Sometimes you have to make a choice to live for yourself." Sophie's heart raced as she looked into Luca's eyes. There was a part of her that knew this was wrong, that she was on the verge of crossing a line she couldn't come back from. But the temptation was too strong, and the pull of Luca's attention was too powerful to resist. Later that night, as they walked along the Seine, Luca leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate. In that moment, all of her doubts and fears melted away, replaced by the thrill of being desired again. But as they parted, and Sophie stood alone on the banks of the river, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. She had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Let's continue the story, diving deeper into the emotional and psychological ramifications of Sophie's choices, while maintaining the complexity and tension within the plot. Here's the next part of the story. Scene 3. The Web of Lies. The next morning, Sophie woke up with a knot in her stomach. She sat at the edge of her bed, the memory of Luca's kiss still lingering on her lips. Her heart was heavy, weighed down by guilt and confusion. The line she had crossed felt too far gone now, and yet there was an undeniable pull toward Luca, a man who made her feel alive in ways Marcus hadn't in years. She glanced at her phone, hoping for a message from Marcus, but it was empty. Nothing. His silence, once something she could handle, now felt unbearable. It was as if the distance between them had grown wider overnight. Sophie rose from her bed, walking to the window that overlooked the Parisian streets below. The city was vibrant, alive with its usual energy, but Sophie felt hollow inside. She had made a choice, one that now seemed impossible to undo. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Luca. "Good morning, Sophie. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" Sophie's heart fluttered, but the guilt was still there, gnawing at her. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Every part of her screamed that this was wrong, but the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "Soon," she typed back, before setting the phone down and turning to her closet. She needed to clear her mind, to get back to her work at the gallery, where at least she could distract herself from the chaos of her emotions. At the gallery, the usual flow of clients and art enthusiasts didn't bring Sophie the comfort it once had. Elodie, her assistant, noticed her unusual distraction. "Madame Laurent," Elodie said gently, approaching her, "is everything all right? You seem off today." Sophie forced a smile. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tea." Her heart pounding. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tired. It's been a long few weeks." Elodie nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Sophie thanked her and returned to her work, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the memory of Marcus. She had been married to him for 6 years, and yet here she was, exchanging secret messages with another man. It felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Later that day, as she stood in the gallery, examining a new shipment of paintings, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Luca. "Dinner tonight. I'll be thinking of you until then." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment where she had to make a decision. To either stop this before it went too far, or to dive in head first. Consequences be damned. Her finger hovered over the screen, her mind racing. She thought about Marcus, about the life they had built together, the promises they had made. But then she thought about Luca, the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. She typed her response before she could stop herself. Yes. That evening, Sophie found herself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. She had chosen a simple, elegant black dress that hugged her figure, but as she looked at herself, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Was she really doing this? Was she really about to meet Luca again? The thought of Marcus weighed heavily on her mind, but she pushed it aside. This was about her, about what she needed, what she wanted. And right now, she needed to feel alive again. She arrived at the restaurant, her heart pounding in her chest. Luca was already there, waiting for her at a candlelit table near the window. He stood when he saw her, his smile warm and inviting. "Sophie," he said softly, his eyes lighting up as she approached. "You look stunning." Sophie smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his compliment. "Thank you." They sat down, and as the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it had before. Luca was attentive, hanging on her every word, making her feel like the center of the universe. The wine flowed, and with each sip, Sophie felt her inhibitions slipping away. By the time dessert arrived, Sophie found herself leaning closer to Luca, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew where this was headed, and yet she couldn't stop herself. She didn't want to stop herself. After dinner, they walked along the Seine, the lights of Paris reflecting off the water, casting a romantic glow over the city. Luca took her hand, and Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine. This was wrong, she knew that, but it felt so right in the moment. They stopped at a secluded spot along the riverbank, and Luca turned to her, his gaze intense. "I can't stop thinking about you, Sophie," he whispered, his voice low and husky. "I haven't felt this way in a long time." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should walk away, but the pull of his words, the intensity of his gaze, was too much. And then he kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative and unsure, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate, more urgent. In that moment, all of her guilt, all of her doubts, melted away. There was only Luca and the way he made her feel. They parted, breathless, and Sophie stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. "I should go," she whispered, her voice shaky. Luca nodded, but there was a look of longing in his eyes. "I understand, but I don't want this to end, Sophie. I don't want us to end." Sophie bit her lip, torn between what she knew was right and what she wanted. "I don't know if I can do this, Luca." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie, and I want to be the one to make you happy." Sophie stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. Scene 4. The Price of Betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself living a double life. By day, she was the successful gallery owner, the loving wife of Marcus Hartmann. But by night, she was Luca Moretti's lover. Their affair was intoxicating, thrilling, and dangerous all at once. Every stolen kiss, every secret meeting, was a reminder of the life Sophie had chosen, one filled with passion, but also with lies. Marcus remained oblivious, consumed by his work. He called occasionally, but their conversations were brief, filled with polite exchanges and talk of his latest projects. Sophie could hear the distance in his voice, but instead of confronting it, she buried herself deeper into her affair with Luca. Luca, for his part, was everything Marcus wasn't. He was attentive, passionate, and fully present in their relationship. With him, Sophie felt alive, desired, and important. But as their affair continued, the guilt began to gnaw at her, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Marcus over the phone, Sophie found herself sitting alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. What had she become? A liar, a cheater. The very thought made her stomach turn. But it wasn't just the guilt that weighed on her. It was the realization that she had fallen out of love with Marcus long before Luca had come into her life. Their marriage had been crumbling for years, held together by memories of a love that no longer existed. And now, it was all falling apart. The weight of Sophie's secret had become unbearable. Every day was a battle between her guilt and her longing for Luca. But even the excitement of their affair had started to sour. What was once thrilling now felt suffocating, like a web of lies tightening around her. One afternoon, as Sophie sat in her gallery office, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. A rare surprise. He almost never called during the day anymore. She hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen, before finally answering. "Hey," she said softly. "Sophie." Marcus's voice was sharp and tense, unlike the usual cold distance she had grown accustomed to. "I'm in Paris. Can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. Marcus hadn't visited Paris in months, and now, out of the blue, he was here. "Of course," Sophie replied, trying to sound casual. "When?" "Tonight, our apartment. I'll be there by 8. Sophie hung up, her mind racing. Marcus didn't just show up unexpectedly, especially not with this urgency in his voice. Something was wrong, and she could feel it deep in her bones. The afternoon passed in a blur, the usual gallery visitors and tasks feeling insignificant compared to the dread looming over her. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, Sophie was pacing the apartment, her nerves frayed. She had cleaned the place obsessively, as if scrubbing away the evidence of her betrayal would somehow erase the guilt that plagued her. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when Marcus walked through the door. He looked exhausted, his tall frame slumped with the weight of something unspoken. His sharp blue eyes, once so full of warmth, were now clouded with something darker. Sophie opened her mouth to greet him, but the words stuck in her throat. Marcus didn't waste any time. "Sophie, I know." Her stomach dropped. She could barely breathe. "No, what?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "About Luca. About your affair." Sophie felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the nearest chair, her head spinning. She began. But the words wouldn't come. What could she say? There was no defense, no excuse. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus's voice was eerily calm, but there was an edge to it, a simmering anger that frightened her. Sophie's mind raced. She could lie, try to downplay the situation, but it was too late for that. Marcus knew. He had known for who knows how long. 2 months, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's been 2 months." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, his gaze was piercing. "Why, Sophie? Why would you do this?" Tears welled in Sophie's eyes, blurring her vision. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The confrontation she had known was inevitable. But now that it was here, she didn't know how to explain the storm of emotions swirling inside her. I don't know," she choked out. "I was lonely, Marcus. You were never here. It felt like you stopped caring about me, about us. She wiped at her eyes, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to feel something again." Marcus let out a harsh sigh, running a hand over his face. "So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your affair?" "No," Sophie exclaimed, shaking her head. "I'm not blaming you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But Marcus, we haven't been happy for a long time. You know that." Marcus's expression hardened. "We could have worked on it, Sophie. We could have talked, gone to counseling. Anything but this." His voice cracked, and for the first time Sophie saw the pain behind his anger. You didn't even give me a chance." Sophie sobbed quietly, her guilt overwhelming. He was right. She hadn't given him a chance. She had taken the easy way out, falling into Luca's arms instead of facing the cracks in her marriage. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I loved you, Sophie. I still do. But I don't think I can forgive this." Sophie felt her heart shatter. She had known this was coming, but hearing the words still cut deeper than she could have imagined. "I understand," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'll move out. I'll leave Paris if you want." Marcus shook his head. You don't have to leave Paris. But this is the end of us." The finality in his words crushed her, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. But deep down, she knew he was right. Their marriage had been crumbling long before Luca entered the picture. The affair had just been the breaking point. Marcus stood up, his expression resolute. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight. We can talk about the details later." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, but just before leaving, he turned to look at her one last time. "Goodbye, Sophie." And with that, he was gone. Sophie sat there, numb, staring at the door. The silence of the apartment was deafening, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of her actions. She had destroyed her marriage, not just with her affair, but with her refusal to face the problems they had been avoiding for years. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Luca. "Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you again." Sophie stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message. Luca was no longer part of her world. He had been an escape, a distraction from the reality of her failing marriage. But now there was nothing left to distract her from. She sat in the dark, the weight of her choices crashing down on her like a wave. The secrets, the lies, the affair, they had all destroyed the one thing she had once held dear. Months passed, and Sophie began to rebuild her life. The divorce was painful, but it also gave her a sense of closure. She and Marcus had both agreed that their marriage had been over long before the affair. They were simply two people who had grown apart, clinging to a relationship that had already unraveled. Sophie continued running her gallery, pouring herself into her work as a way to heal. She had ended things with Luca shortly after the confrontation with Marcus. It hadn't been easy, but she knew it was the right decision. Luca had been a temporary escape, a bandage over a deeper wound. But now, Sophie was ready to face her life without distractions. She spent more time with friends, reconnected with her family, and slowly began to rediscover who she was outside of her failed marriage. It wasn't easy. There were days when the guilt and loneliness overwhelmed her. But there were also moments of clarity, moments when she realized that her mistakes didn't define her. One evening, as Sophie walked along the Seine, she stopped at the same spot where she had kissed Luca months before. The memory of that night no longer held the same allure. Instead, it served as a reminder of the choices she had made and the consequences she had faced. She took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze wash over her. She was learning to forgive herself, learning to move on. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Thank you for watching this story of love, loss, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you. If you have any questions about Sophie's journey or your own thoughts about relationships and forgiveness, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging stories like this one.